Dr. Narco Longo.
Brought to you by the Florida Department of Magic. Welcome to Florida, baby.
Florida is the original Garden of Eden.
Concentration of freshwater springs in the world.
Florida oranges are the golden apples of mythology. A race of giant men once roamed this peninsula. The Smithsonian can suck my balls. Megalithic ship anchors, known as Saxor stones. I'm bringing Saxor back.
How's it going, everyone? Happy tax day. We're going to be talking about finances, money, how America was sold out from within, and why our taxes are so high, why there's so much debt, maybe why we go into so many wars. We're going to talk about the Federal Reserve tonight. And it's a fitting day since it's tax day. And of course, when we're talking about the Federal Reserve, that's going to bring us back to Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island is a small, medium-sized island just over the Florida state line in Georgia, on the Atlantic coast of Georgia. So just over the Florida state line. At one time in history, that used to be called Florida, but that's Jekyll Island. So I've been there. I've made a couple videos on Jekyll Island, and now we've got some fresh perspectives here on Jekyll Island. We've got Merlin, who you guys know, and also Brett Pike from Classical Learner, who a lot of you guys know. And yeah, that's it. We're going to talk about Jekyll Island, Federal Reserve. What else is going to come up? Maybe some sacrificial altars on Jekyll Island. Maybe some giant Indians. The Rockefeller family. J.P. Morgan. The Warburgs, Rothschilds. All that good stuff. So Jekyll Island is a treasure trove of terrifying conspiracy theories. Also, I believe one of the last slave ships to ever come to America went to Jekyll Island. So pretty interesting. So before we get too far into it, what's up, guys? Merlin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I love what you said so far, man. All wars are bankers' wars. It's as relevant today as it ever has been. So this is going to be a great episode.
Totally. What have you been up to since we last saw you?
Making videos and studying the stars, basically, dude. The astrology today is incredible. Like we were talking about before the show, right now there are so many planets in Aries right now. It's fire. Things are nuts. Things are happening, obviously, all around the world. Trump acting all over Iran. Fuel shortages, protests erupting in Europe, and I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon, honestly.
Hell yeah. Love to see the world burning. But no, just kidding. Well, the world's always falling apart, as I like to say. The world's always ending. It's been the apocalypse ever since 10,000 BC. But whatever. So, Brett, how have you been since we last saw you? What have you been up to?
I'm doing good, and I love that we are tackling this topic on tax day because, as most people know, my specialty is teaching the youth of America. And I think it's really important that as many people as possible understand that it hasn't always been this way. And the things that we accept today as the new normal, right? Like they rolled out at COVID, this will be the new normal. Well, there was a time when paying taxes to the federal government, right? They said, this is the new normal. So we need to rewind that back. We need to get to that point and reverse all the damage that's been done to this country over the last, 120 years. And I think we will. So I'm optimistic.
Okay. Well, that answered my first question was, can it be undone? And you're optimistic. I'm usually a pretty white pill guy. But maybe at the end, we'll talk about where this is all going with crypto and, Trojan horses or saving graces, But
yeah, well,
go ahead.
if I could interject a little bit more, and I don't know if everyone knows this or not, but Dr. Longo taught a history class for Classical Learner this semester on the Age of Discovery. And it was a phenomenal class, and the community was, as soon as it ended, everyone was, is he coming back? Is he coming back? And they're very happy that you gave a verbal that you'll be back in September. But the reason I bring that up is people ask, can we win? Will we win? And my answer is yes. Because if you look at what's happening on the social media front, if you look at what's happening with the pure volume of people that are awake, and many of them are homeschooling their children, you're having generations, full generations of young people that are now being brought up awake to the world and very patriotic. They love this country. They're aware of what has happened to it. And that's at the grassroots level. But the other part of that, the other variable is, as this whole generation of young people grows up awake, they're also being taught entrepreneurship. They're also being taught financial literacy and how to actually win in the real world from a very young age. And these children of today that are in school right now, in 10 years, they're going to be the next wave of new millionaires, right? And in 20 years, they're going to be the next wave of new billionaires. And what you're going to have in this country is you're going to have the grassroots change where people are awake from the time they're young. And then as they start to get the money and the power, you're going to have the top down push. And it's going to start to crunch the system and mold it into what we want it to be. So people ask, red pill, blue pill, black pill, white pill. And what I would say is that if everyone saw the world through my eyes, through what I get to see every day, they would know that we are going to win, and it's just a matter of time.
Oh, hell yeah. I agree with that. And I got a glimpse into what he's talking about the kids. And, I don't know if all the homeschooling services are as good as yours, but if what you've created is a good sample of maybe some other movements, I'd agree with that optimism.
Well, you look at classical conversations, the good and the beautiful, you can go from homeschool company to homeschool company, and these are incredible educational resources. And the most beautiful part of all of it is not only are there more resources than ever for parents that want to homeschool, but even if the companies themselves aren't perfect, even if the companies themselves aren't awake to this or that, and I say all the time that I think we're the most based in red pill education company in the world, but even the companies that aren't, they're still really good. And it doesn't matter because it's the parents in the end that are facilitating and driving the education. So as long as the parents are awake to the world and they're taking the steps to give their children the best education, you're going to get that pressure cooker. You're going to get the awake youth that eventually gets power from the top and squeezes the system into what we all want it to be.
Oh, hell yeah. We're talking about some bargains over here too, people.
I do appreciate that. Showing the, thank you. Showing the stuff.
Oh, hell yeah, man. If we drag you out here, we gotta promote your good service, which I'm also very much involved with. So if you guys got kids, guys and gals, dads, moms out there, get your kids enrolled. All right. So they can learn about the Federal Reserve. They can learn about Columbus, the truth about slavery, the truth about, this and that. So get them started young. And these kids impressed me a lot with their, how engaged they were. It's crazy. All right. Let's get on with the show. The Federal Reserve. What is the Federal Reserve? In case you guys don't know what that is, if you've been living under a semiconductor these last couple of years, basically, the Federal Reserve is the central banking system of the United States. and it was implemented. What is it? 1914?
13.
1913.
The Federal Reserve Act was passed on Christmas break of 1913 and implemented 1914.
Thank you. Conceived 1910, it would seem, as per this secretive meeting on Jekyll Island. But the Federal Reserve, before the Federal Reserve, currency in America looked a lot different. That's number one. I kind of first got into this stuff a little bit. I watched Jekyll Island videos back then, Robert Sepper and stuff. I got back into it from more of a Florida angle after looking at all this, Florida history and seeing all these different Florida currencies that they had up until 1910. There's like 20 different currencies that Florida had used at different times. Private, local, you name it. Some of them are really good, very, profitable, successful. They worked. Some of them not so much, but I'm not going to act like we had a perfect system before the Federal Reserve came in. And I think that's something that we're going to be talking a lot about. A gentleman named Tim Bence tonight. He's the guy who blew the lid off. Not just, people knew the financial side of Jekyll Island. They knew the financial side of the Federal Reserve. Timothy Bence, who's a preacher, a mystic, a Christian mystic. He specializes in exorcising places instead of people, removing curses from places. We'll talk more about him later, but he gives a very fair, he's a Libra, Merlin, he's a Libra. So he's very fair. He doesn't place too much blame on anyone. And he says, I don't know if we would have came up with something better. I don't know if we ever had something better. I don't know if we'd have the America we have now without the Federal Reserve. But we do need to be aware and upfront about the dark magic and deception that went into it. So we're not acting like, hey, I've got a better system over here in my back pocket, no, we know it's not that simple, but not many people know how sinister this history really is with the Federal Reserve, the Jekyll Island. But all right, let's get started. Where's a good place to start? The Revolutionary War, perhaps?
Sure. We could talk about how the founding fathers were wary of the power of central banks, many of them, with a storied history of resisting central banking.
Let's do that. What did the founding fathers think about banking? Because that would be a good kind of bearing on the compass to know, how we're doing today is what did the founding fathers envision for America?
Well, if I could take the lead by going on a short rant, and then I'll come back to you two, and you can really get into the nitty-gritty details of the founding fathers and what they thought about money and the banking system. But one of the fundamental things that, and I think I've had a very successful campaign over the last 2 years of really spreading this kind of rhetorical fact that everyone should know, that for the first 137 years that America was a country, there was no legal federal income tax, right? The first 137 years, from 1776 to 1913, there was no legal federal income tax in the United States of America. And we could talk about the first Bank of the United States and the second Bank of the United States, but the bottom line is, the truth is that America functioned very well. And, we could ask the question, would America be today what it, ultimately became without the Federal Reserve System? Well, to answer that, we have to look at what there was before the Federal Reserve System. And after the War of 1812, America had the second Bank of the United States and went into some debt for the war. And Andrew Jackson, along with James Monroe and John Quincy Adams, actually paid off all of America's debt without a federal income tax. they did it with just tariffs. And Andrew Jackson, to this day, he was the third president in that line, became the only president in the history of the United States of America to fully pay off America's debt. So that's in the 1830s. From that point forward, America has no federal income tax. It is a tariff-based system. You get up to the 1890s, and under William McKinley, I believe they called it, I don't want to say the golden age because that's what they're using now, but there was a term they had, the McKinley prosperity. And at the time, there was a 50% universal tariff on everything. And America was becoming the richest, most powerful country in the world under that system. And you had American steel and American oil and American automotive, and all the manufacturing was here in America. In fact, America had become so wealthy that Spain knew they were going to lose the Spanish-American War before it even started. The war kicks off, and Congress is able to just pull $50 million from the surplus they had, which was a tremendous amount of money at the time. And Spain couldn't believe it. They were like, how are they this wealthy that they don't even have to go into debt to fight this war? And that's what America was at that time. So you had this booming in the Industrial Revolution. You had the fastest growing middle class in the history of the world. And all of that was done without the central bank. All of that was done without the federal income tax. Now, some people will say, Brett, but you said there was no federal income tax the first 137 years America was a country. Well, okay, you're right. There was an income tax imposed during the Civil War. Now, we can say that was legal or not, but half the country was at war. So I don't think there was a fair vote in Congress for that, right? So you had an income tax imposed during the Civil War. That was temporary. 1872, they get rid of that income tax. Well, around 1894, the progressives, typical of progressives, start to complain that, you know, this system's not fair because it's really not making the rich pay their fair share. And you know what would make the rich pay their fair share? It would be an income tax. Plus, the rich really should, these American companies, they should have to compete with global companies because that will lower the price of goods here. So we're going to make the rich pay more in taxes. We're going to lower the price of goods. And the progressives actually get an income tax passed 1894. Well, in 1895, the Supreme Court hears a court case, Pollock v. Farmers. The Supreme Court rules the federal income tax unconstitutional. And we could get into what happened between that time. What happened between 1895 and 1913, because some people say that the progressives made the federal income tax happen to stick it to the rich. But I would argue, and we can get into it a little bit after, but the Rockefellers get involved, and there is definitely some debate as to whether the Rockefellers were actually the driving force behind the federal income tax. And as a type of propaganda, they made it look like they were against it. So we could talk more about that, but I just overview of what America was and what it was up until 1913, because we know what it was afterwards. And if people don't know where we come from, then they don't know what's possible. So from that point, I throw it back to you. Jump into it. Founding fathers, what did they think about banking?
No, that's great, Brett. That's a great overview and entree to kind of America's financial history. I didn't know much of that. To your point about Rockefeller, it's also worth mentioning that the Antitrust Act, Sherman Antitrust Act, and then specifically Standard Oil had been broken up, which was pushing Rockefeller into a different, industry, different avenue, different methodology of getting filthy rich. I mean, he couldn't run oil the way he had before, but yeah, so Rockefeller's heavily involved, but yeah, Merlin, man, any thoughts? I'll pull your.
I like that you mentioned Andrew Jackson because he is such a great president. And like you said, his history is that of defeating the banks. That was his most proud accomplishment. And you mentioned Andrew Jackson last episode too. And someone commented, they were like, oh, you thought Andrew Jackson was a good president. Why don't you ask the Native Americans? And people need to realize how much propaganda there is against people who fight the central banks. All right.
Yeah.
Were there problems with the natives? Yes. But Andrew Jackson was such a good president because, like Brett said, he paid off the debt and killed the central banks, which was incredible. And everybody who fights the banks or fights the system, the man, whatever you want to call it, they all get maligned throughout history. Whereas the people who are the bitches of the bankers, like Alexander Hamilton, he was like an agent of the Rothschilds, and now he's got musicals written about him, you know, whereas, and he has a statue on Wall Street because he is the bitch of Wall Street. So like they completely inverse who the hero and who the villain is supposed to be. They villainize the heroes and they aggrandize the true villains, which are the people who work for the bank. So it's like totally backwards, the propaganda out there, I'd say.
Yeah, you know, a really interesting aspect of the Trail of Tears, and I need to make a social video on this because I've never spoken about this publicly, and you guys can fact check me and see if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Andrew Jackson, who is blamed for what occurred with what's called the Trail of Tears, where Native Americans were moved from their land along with their slaves that they took with them, and so I just had to throw that in there. I can't help myself, but Andrew Jackson, while he signed the Indian Removal Act to facilitate this process, he wasn't actually the president that oversaw the Trail of Tears. That was Van Buren. So he gets blamed for the Trail of Tears when he wasn't even the president that actually oversaw what happened, which is a really interesting historical tidbit, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Merlin, you want to get specific about maybe what some of these FFs thought about banking?
Yeah, this is Thomas Jefferson right here. Quote, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, guys, are we experiencing inflation? And then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all property. Will you own nothing and be happy? Until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Thomas Jefferson, also heavily maligned.
Yeah. Right. And who were name some other maligned figures like you did before we went live?
Oh yeah, so you know Andrew Jackson, horrible Indian hunter, right? Like literally, you know, he killed and tortured Indians, and then you know, a certain, you know, Austrian statesman in the 1930s, you know, fought the central banks, and he has a micro penis allegedly. King James, based beyond belief, commissions the best English language Bible, and he's a gay demonologist allegedly.
He killed his mommy. He killed
Right?
his mommy.
So it's just totally backwards. And then Thomas McFadden, who was a congressman in the 1930s, they called him antiseptic, and you know, he was chased out of the party once he started criticizing the feds. So it's whoever fights the banks gets maligned, and whoever you know does their bidding is a hero. It's totally backwards.
Yep. Ron Paul,
Yep.
Rand Paul, Thomas Massey. Who else? But all right.
Thomas Massey is such a good current example. And what they have done to that man is legit just criminal. And he is like one of the very few politicians in our time who could actually stand up for the people, you know, like rightfully.
Right. So who else?
I don't know. You guys got me so fired up about Andrew Jackson now. I have so much Jackson gravy that people don't know that I just...
Oh, yeah?
All right. Just going back to I know it's a little off topic, but going back to Jackson for a second. So,
Yeah.
All right. So in the 1830s, he becomes the only president in United States history to pay off the national debt. And the banksters of today try to rewrite that history or frame that history, but yeah, don't you know there was depression afterwards? So we needed the central bank, right? When he killed the second bank in the United States, that sent America into a depression. But what they don't say is that while it hurt Wall Street, if you look at places like Chicago, I'm pretty sure we can look this up, but type in, did places like Chicago experience a significant price in the cost of new homes in the late 1830s, early 1840s? They had like an 85 to 90% reduction in the price of new homes. And what Jackson said is that he hated concentrated financial power when it's in the hands of the elites. And while his policies hurt Wall Street, they made land and houses available to the average person. Like, I don't know, if the Federal Reserve or the banking system were to collapse today, that might hurt Wall Street. But if you got rid of the funny money, would young people actually be able to afford houses again? So it's funny how these things go full circle when you start to dig into them.
Are we sure those weren't just a bunch of Cabbage Patch babies being hatched out of the subway incubators, just crashing the housing market? I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. Hang on.
This
folks.
inflation's crazy though, Brett. I've not heard of this, but at least this AI quick check says yes, Chicago experienced a dramatic increase in real estate prices during the 1830s, with per acre prices rising from $800 to $327,000. So $800 in 1830
All right.
to $330K in 1836.
So now you have to frame this right. So now
maybe they invented the Dodge Charger between 1830 and 1840.
So now ask the AI, in the late 1830s and early 1840s, did Chicago experience a dramatic reduction in the price of new homes? So you had the spike and then the Andrew Jackson drop.
Let's take a look. It's generating.
Show me what you got.
Well, here.
All seeing brain.
Yeah, dude. So it peaked in 36 and then fell 88% by 1841. It says due to a financial panic and subsequent bank failures.
So as Jackson said, his policies harmed Wall Street, and he broke the concentrated financial wealth so that the average person could afford to live. And that's historically framed as, oh, look at him, there was this massive failure. And now you see today where the housing bubble, right, it's so propped up by all the fiat money, right, the bank loans and all the housing loans. And because of that, right, the price of housing has gone up and up and up and up. And the boomers, they're like, what have you done, millennial? My house that I bought for $10,000 in 1965 is now worth $2 million. Why don't you get rich?
Yeah.
But the only reason it's worth $2 million is because the fake funny money, it's not really worth that. And if we were to find a way to properly replace that central banking system and all the funny money, would we experience something like Andrew Jackson's quote unquote financial panic when regular people could all of a sudden afford homes instead of all the money being concentrated in the hands of the financial elite? So it's really interesting how this history is framed in a way that is through the perspective of the certain powers that be.
Shall yeah. Since we're going off on Jackson tangents, how many people out there know about the Georgia Gold Belt? Gold Belt. Okay. Did you guys know that up until the Civil War, I don't know about a majority, but much of America's gold coins were minted in Georgia, called the Dahlonega Mint. Dahlonega. Now, today, I believe this is on Cherokee Indian land. But did you know that the purest gold in the world comes out of the Georgia Gold Belt?
No.
Nice.
Yep. And America was using that gold for a long time. The Civil War kind of taught, mixed things up a little bit. But by the time we get to, kind of the reparations, like after, way after Jackson's gone, oh, we need to feel real bad for the Indians. A lot of this land ends up being given to the Cherokees. And man, you know how much gold is probably still there in those hills, their hills.
There's gold in them hills.
And the Cherokee, used to be filthy. They are still pretty wealthy, but back then they used to be filthy rich because they had access to these gold mines. Cherokee gold. So who knows? People always say, oh, the Fort Knox gold. Where's the Fort Knox gold? Where's the Georgia gold? We've got the purest gold in the world here in America. And Jekyll Island is also in Georgia. So interesting. And what we're getting at here, what needs to be kind of prefaced is, I believe powers that be sought to make Jekyll Island the financial capital of the Western Hemisphere, much in the same way, or at least the Americas, let's say that, in the same way that Jerusalem used to be the financial headquarters of Eurasia. In Jesus's day, this is something that Timothy Bence deserves credit for too. He links the usury, he traces the usury, the blood sacrifice, the banking, all of it back to Jesus's life and ministry. Okay. And it was an issue that had been going on for hundreds of years before him. That in Jesus's day, the temple in Jerusalem was a slaughterhouse and a casino, a gambling house, a, prospecting, buying, selling, trading, loaning, you name it. Okay. And it was bad business. Judging by how Jesus went in there with a whip and whipped these scum out of the place, it was not good business. This was dirty business. On the back of those coins, you had pictures of Caesar, maybe King Herod sometimes, or Hercules, or some mythological figure. A lot of the times, you had the face of Baal on these coins. You guys know that? They were called
crazy.
They were called the Tyrrhenian shekel. It's either the Tyrian or the Tyrrhenian. One of those two. It's Tyre. This was like a Phoenician tradition or a Phoenician legacy. This perfectly minted coin that by the time Jesus was alive, the only coin that they would accept as final payment in the temple was the Tyrrhenian shekel, which had either the face of Baal or some Greek god or some Caesar, some figure on it. And this is pagan, idolatrous money that is not only has a graven image of an idol on it, it's also being used to buy and sell and to cheat people in God's temple. That's what Jesus was walking into. So not only was this an animal rights issue, this was an economic overthrow. The system in Jerusalem was based off of the temple sacrificial system. Where did mankind discover banking from? We're going pretty far back from the founding fathers, but where does banking really come from? Blood sacrifice. The notion that you owe something beyond what you possess on your body, that you could ever owe someone beyond what's on your possession. It's black magic, this fractional reserve banking, interest, whatever it is. The notion that you've offended so bad that you now owe more than you can physically pay back. That goes back to the sacrificial system. So that's a big, whole messy conversation, and there's some theology involved, and because a lot of people like their blood ransom theology. A lot of people really like that, and they think that's valid, and that's the essence of Christianity. No. So why are we talking about Jerusalem, Jekyll Island? Well, just to drill this point home, let's go to the map real quick. Do you guys know the latitude of Jerusalem?
33 degrees?
Almost.
30?
Eh,
And I'm guessing. It's
Yeah.
around
No, we're
that neck of the woods.
no, we're getting 31.
Okay.
31 degrees. So here, let's go look at the maps.
Real quick, while you pull that up, man, it's cool how like there's that gold association with Georgia, with George the Dragon Slayer, and then the dragon association with gold and hordes of gold.
So guys, here's Jekyll Island. How many people do you know can no-scope Jekyll Island from the satellite? Not many people.
everybody,
Okay.
dude.
I can also no-scope the Euphrates and Tigris in Iraq, but
We are in the presence of the master.
I'm a bit of a rain bolt myself. If you, that's his name, right? Rain bolt.
Is that the Google Earth guy? Who's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that patch of dirt, that's in this, dude.
Yeah.
That's just wild.
So this is Jekyll Island, guys. Jekyll Island right there, 31.0. You can't see my little window here, but it says 31.0 latitude, 31 parallel north. So that's 31.0, Jekyll Island. And by the way, there's a place called Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Georgia, right over here. If we put the labels
That's
on.
cool.
Yeah, Jerusalem is. One sec. There's 2 Jerusalem, Georgias. This one time I gave an interview and I said, oh, yeah, there's a Jerusalem, Georgia right over the bridge from Jekyll Island. And the host was like, oh, cool. And then the number 1 comment on the interview said, Jerusalem, Georgia is hundreds of miles away from Jekyll Island. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You need to double check these idiots before you have them on. And I'm like, bruh, it's right here. Right here, right where I said it was. 30. We're almost there.
I think your next course might have to be geography with Dr. Longo.
Maybe. Well, 31.0 is that red pin right there. And that is Jerusalem, Georgia. East Georgia. There's another Jerusalem, Georgia. So 31 degrees precisely. Now let's go over to the Middle East. Jerusalem, right here, 31 degrees latitude. So what does this mean? Okay. In the old world, Jerusalem at one time served as this financial capital. It was like the Washington, D.C., or, like this. It was Rome. It wasn't really part of Rome. The Romans were using it because it made so much money in taxes and this temple sacrifice system. So we're setting the stage here for why did they choose Jekyll Island? They chose Jekyll Island, number 1, I think, because it has the same latitude as Jerusalem. That has meaning to these people. If you believe in ley lines, if you believe in, anniversaries are important. It's always good to demonstrate this to people. Anniversaries are like the temporal equivalent of returning to the same place where something important happened, right? On this day 10 years ago, I blah blah blah. You see that? Geographically, you can get away with some similar things. Like, it doesn't have to be you return to the exact same spot. Returning to the exact same latitude can check a box or check a criteria. These people are very mystically minded, and I think it's important we try and understand why they chose Jekyll Island. Why not just a sailboat out in the ocean, right, if they wanted privacy? But we're skipping pretty far along here. But the point is, Jerusalem and Jekyll Island are on the same latitude.
And that latitude is the same distance from the North Pole is what that really is. And then if you understand what the North Pole truly is, geographically, if you understand your true cosmology, then that becomes really freaking interesting.
Right. Yeah. So Jerusalem right here, 31. Also, the Nile is like 31 and 31. Couple other cool cities. Exactly where the Tigris and Euphrates. That's not it. Exactly where the Tigris and Euphrates split. 31.00. So this is allegedly the old Garden of Eden, right? The newer one, the popular one. But after the Crusades, by the way, no one thought this was the Garden of Eden. They had been to the Middle East. Thousands of people had died. It had proven to everyone this is not the Garden of Eden. 1,000 years later, we have fallen right back into that psyop, thinking the Garden of Eden is right where Israel would like you to think it is, right? To keep us invested in the Middle East. But so, all right. Back to the founding fathers. We any more notable figures that we can't skip over?
Yeah, there's quite a few. We got Thomas Jefferson. We got another quote by Jefferson is just the fact that he said that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. That's probably his most famous quote on banking, and honestly true given the fact that the bankers have played both sides. You know, we talked earlier about how they maligned Napoleon, right? Napoleon's known as this super short guy when he wasn't really that short. But the Rothschilds, House Rothschilds, profited tremendously because they played both sides of the Napoleonic Wars. We also have James Madison. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means, true, and true, possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. And isn't that such a huge problem? How, like, think about, like, this is why democracy is almost a sham, I think, is because, like, if these money changers can just totally buy our politicians and they control the current, like, all money, then they have complete power. And then what good is the democracy if these people just run the whole freaking thing, essentially?
Right. Oh, 100%. You guys want to mess around with that for a little bit? Democracy, is it good? Is it, man? I saw this tweet today.
You got me up, by the way.
Yeah. Don't worry. Don't worry. I saw this tweet today where this guy said, anything but a true democracy is un-American. And this was like a congressman who tweeted this, on the left, of course. Anything other than a true democracy is un-American. Bro, we're not a true democracy. You've got to be retarded to not know the difference. The people who came up with our form of democracy, right? Constitutional, republic, and, whatever. They were deathly afraid of true democracy, okay? Which is, in essence, mob rule, okay? Rule by the overpopulated cities. Like, rule, if you can get more people in to vote, you have your way. So it's so funny that the people who always talk about equity, like, don't understand like one person's vote maybe being worth more than another, right?
Yeah, it's funny how, there was such an emphasis on the word republic at the founding of our country. I was thinking about that earlier today, man, like when we were getting ready for the show, and it's like that has totally eroded and been replaced by democracy. I'm sure you guys and many in the audience have seen that compilation of all the news stations saying, this is a threat to our democracy. This is a threat to our democracy. But like you just said, we don't have a democracy. We have a constitutional republic for now. And you're really well versed in your Platonic philosophy. didn't Aristotle or Plato talk about how awful democracy is?
Yeah, I'm not that well versed. I've read the complete works of Plato, most of it, but I don't study Plato as much as some people. But yes, Plato, in the lead up to the Atlantis story, so in the Republic, I believe, lays out the 4 different types of government and says there's tyranny, there's oligarchy, there's rule through terror or military might, oppression, which is fear, rule through money, right? Oligarchy, whatever. Monarchy, so inherited, you know, uh, inherited rule. And then the 4th is voted, democratic rule. Plato essentially says democracy is perhaps the worst, and it's ruled by the mentally ill. Because in a democracy there is no agreement. It's like a constant chatter. If Plato was had a very holistic, as above so below view of government. He saw the government as the body, right? The body, a reflection of the government, and vice versa. The human body, each citizen in a government had to be like a functioning microcosm of that government. And so he believed, he liked kings. He believed in a philosopher king, or at least wrote, the Republic that way, to where the philosopher king is almost, a reluctant ruler. But in democracy, he says, in a kingship, we have been so brainwashed to think in a king, that's when you have the least rights under a king. If there's a king, he gets whatever he wants and you get nothing. Plato did not see it that way. Plato said, under a kingship, each man is king of himself. Under a kingship, each man is king of his home, king of his farm, right? The precedent for authority that trickles down from the top is complete control, complete authority. And I don't know if we've seen true monarchy in a long, long time. I don't know if we've seen a true king, because remember, Plato's king was not a inherited monarch, so there's some nuance there. But people are so afraid of kings because we have been brainwashed to only be familiar with the corrupt, weak, power hungry. Yep, you hand over that much power, no man can handle that much power. How much do we hear that? Star Wars, this, that. It's all the same shit. No man can handle that much power. No, fuck that. If you're afraid of the king, you're afraid of what you would do with that much power. That's what you're afraid of. I'm in favor of getting the best man we have, and whatever, blah blah blah. But
agreed, bro.
Plato did not see democracy as the solution to all our problems, and he was pretty realistic about how you can cram as many mentally ill, poor, you name it, cram as many in as you can, and you win the vote. If you're voting countryside versus the city's going to win almost every time. We run into this today, and people still whine about the popular vote. Idiots. But
it's true. Well, that's that gets into the power of the Magna Carta and where we come from, right? Like the birth of Western civilization, because you had kings or monarchs, and what the Magna Carta established was that the monarch was bound by the laws the same way that everyone else was. So this was a major advancement in human history where really for the first time you had this idea, which was established by Western civilization, that a king is restricted by the law, right? So you could have any type of system, and you could have abuse with democracy, you could have abuse with monarchy, you could have a great monarchy, you could have, great other systems.
Yep.
What matters is, are the people in power held accountable by the law? And I think the problem we're facing right now in the modern world is that they're not. I mean, how often does a United States senator get arrested and in prison? How much does a president or a senator or anyone in the government go to jail? Yet we all know, I mean, it's not even a secret how much corruption there is. So when you have this systematic rot and this just pervasive corruption and no one's ever held accountable, well, you're not going to have an effective system with that. So, I mean, there's a lot there, but yeah, I mean, right now, you started this conversation talking about even democracy, and like people had this idea in their mind, oh, well, the white men were always allowed to vote. Even that was a new idea. White men, no one was voting for most of human history. And then when they started to allow some voting, like, yeah, I think they did it right in that if you were in debt, right, you couldn't vote. If you're taking handouts from the government, you can't vote, because as soon as you get this democratic type system where you have people that often they're bringing across the border, right, and whether they're doing it illegally or giving them citizenship, people on government programs, and you're telling them that all you have to do is vote to take money from your neighbors, and then the government can do it, right? And then you get like this Mondami character, and you see right now, I mean, I'm not like into the Democrat-Republican thing right now because the Republicans have just been so disappointing to me. But, you know, like to see the Democrats on the left side just actively campaigning, like, we're going to tax the rich. And all that is telling the masses to give us the authority and we will take money from your neighbor and then give it to you. And if that's the system, well, I mean,
As if.
who could look at that objectively and say, that's a fair system, that's a good system, right? That's just basically two wolves and a sheep voting for, you know, what they're going to have for dinner.
Right.
Yep.
Hell yeah. Here we got David Woodworth with a 1999 tip. That's a lot of tokens, sweetie. Thanks. Thanks for that. No message on the tip, just the money, just how I like it. Okay. But any other founding fathers?
Yeah, tons, man. So another one for John Adams. You know, that's been up there. I'll go to the next one. John Adams, all the perplexities, confusion, and distress in America arise not from defects in their constitution or confederation, not from want of honor or virtue, so much as from the downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. And isn't that a problem? Again, like we have Brett here who runs a great homeschooling program, and the public school system does not educate the youth on what, like, how many people who graduate high school today can answer what, if you ask them what is money, where does money come from, could they give you a even somewhat accurate answer? Probably not. Many of them don't know what a continent or a country is. So we have some serious problems when it comes to ignorance of important things like currency. We've also got Andrew Jackson, someone we love here. The bold effort of the present central bank has made to control the government are but premonitions of the fate that await the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation of this institution or the establishment of another like that. And we see, you know, one thing you opened the stream with long ago was how much we're paying in taxes. And it's a direct result of funny money. It's a direct result of central banking and this corrupt system that we're under. You know, it's becoming for many people unlivable. You know, homelessness is skyrocketing. And like you guys, I'm very much a white pill person. You know, I do believe we're going to win. But the road to get there is, you know, looking rough for a lot of people, sadly. Another Andrew Jackson quote. This is a great one. If the people only understood the rank injustice of our money and banking system, there would be a revolution by morning. And that kind of harkens back to what you were saying earlier, Brett, how like if people only saw what I saw, they'd see that we're gonna win, you know. And if Jackson was like, if people saw what I saw, they'd be revolting right now, you know. And I think there's truth to both of those statements, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, I made a video earlier today, and I threw it together pretty quick, but I think it hit the point pretty hard that if you go back to the slaves in Egypt, right? They paid the pharaoh 20% of their harvest, right? So they were taxed 20%. These were the slaves; they were taxed 20%.
Hmm.
I used the Inca as an example because people would look at them and say, "Wow." The government took all able-bodied males, forcibly removed them from their homes for 2 months a year to do forced labor for the government. So they paid a 16% tax.
No, we
Um,
was we was angels over here in America. Okay, they knew nothing but Pocahontas and you know
right, right.
Bambi.
They had their legs crossed. They were smoking peyote, and they were just living with the animals, hugging the
Yeah,
bears. But then you look at the United States of America today. I mean, the average person, 30%, 33% Illuminati confirmed of their income goes to the government. So that's 4 months a year
yeah,
that you work for free. January, February, March, April, you haven't earned one penny. All of that labor you've done for a third of the year goes to the government, which is remarkable when you I try to create a visual to show people that of how much that is. And then we are the people that come from the Boston Tea Party, right? I mean, that was over a 3% tax on tea. And the money, who's it going to? Jeffrey Epstein's buddies to
Mhm.
yeah,
pay for fraud being committed by Somalis with fake daycares in Minnesota, or to fund foreign wars that are probably on behalf or definitely on behalf of a foreign country. So it's like you see it, and it's remarkable that people would want to go along with it. And it gets back to what you brought up, Dr. Longo. It's what you brought up is this is the problem with the democracy model, right? Where it's like you get the people and they'll just vote for this. They're like, yeah, but we just got to tax the rich. So
yeah,
socialism, because I need my whatever it is that I need. Um, and in spite of all that, and you see that with the citizen on the street interviews, right? Where they go and they interview
yeah.
the always public schooled people, right? And they
Point
ask
point
them.
point to America on a map, and they point to Africa, and
Exactly. Yeah, they can't do it. So it's like just bringing it full circle. But once you see it,
yeah, yeah, man. And let's see.
That point you brought up, bro, about how it's like 1/3 of the year is spent giving money to the government, and like you said, they literally hate you. They're using that money to actively harm you, which is the crazy thing. Like they're spending money in ways that are actively harming the native population, whether it's through replacement, further indoctrination of your children, or whatever. It's very harmful.
Yeah,
yeah. If I could jump into this just a little bit more, and I've been thinking about making social media videos on this because it just drives me crazy. Because they're like, you know, raise the taxes on the rich, and we need to regulate this and that. And I do agree we need some regulations in some areas, but people don't understand, like, when they use this rhetoric, when they're saying the rich, they're like, if you make over $350,000, you're considered in like the top 1% in America. So like when they say the rich, they're not talking about like the
yeah.
Rockefellers.
They're talking about they're talking about the upper middle class.
Yeah, they're killing the middle class. They're killing small businesses that create jobs. So like, for example, I pay all these sales taxes because I sell books all over the country. I pay $15,000 a year in services just for companies to handle paying the sales tax for me. So like, I'm a small business, I'm not rolling in money. And just to handle that one tax alone, I have to pay other companies of like accountants $15,000 a year to get that paid for me, on top of the taxes I have to pay, on top of the filing. And that's just sales tax, right? Then you hire employees and you have payroll taxes. You're paying the government taxes for the right to pay your fellow man money. And everywhere you look, they make it so hard for that small middle class business to operate. And people just don't understand it because the majority of people live in la la land and wouldn't know rhetoric if it smacked them in the face. But I mean, this is what's really happening. And it really does get back to that conversation about like democracy and just letting everyone vote, because I don't know. I mean, if you go back, you talk about 1913, how many Americans know that the same year they passed the Federal Reserve Act, the same year they passed the federal income tax, that was the first year that people started directly voting for senators, right? The 17th Amendment was passed at that time too. Before that, the senators weren't elected by democracy. They were elected via republic by the state legislators. So it hasn't always been this way, as I like to say.
Totally. I mean, you know, it's hard to think of any other solutions without total deportation or repatriation of, you know, a lot of America's hanger-ons and parasites, criminal, you know, sub-communities, that if we keep letting people vote the way they've been voting, and if the needle keeps getting pushed more and more into the popular vote, true democracy direction, I mean, you know, you have a full the racial makeup of America is not what it was at all. The values of
time.
The values of these people flooding into America are not remotely the founding fathers' views or opinions. And honestly, it's going to take something like a different form of representation, or a return to the more representative, you know, format, right? You represent your community, delegates, something like that. Educated, invested men. Sorry, ladies. Okay. Men who are invested in this country's well-being, not just financially, territorially, you know, like the ground under their feet, they need to be invested in the well-being, invested in everything. These need to be criteria for voting. You cannot let someone who hates America, and by the way, guys, people always love to say right versus left, okay? I love the right versus left system. I love the two-party this and that. I love it. I love the two birds, two wings of the same bird. I love that shit. I love it. Suck on that, okay? Sorry, that's not the ultimate Uno card you think it is. That doesn't make you the smartest person in the room when you say both sides are controlled. Well, how about this? Maybe you don't know your history too much. There was a time when right and left argued over how we keep our homes and families safer and more prosperous. Now you've got one side saying, I believe in families, and the other side saying families need to crash and burn and they're oppressive. So guys, we need to fix that right and left system. I don't know how we're going to do it, but please do not get so dissuaded, so apathetic, so disheartened that you won't ever vote again. People, please, you're not solving the world's problems. You're not fixing anything by not voting. I beg people, please go vote red till you're dead. Only the good ones, as much as we can. You know, 2 years ago, we had multiple women in Lake Worth Beach. Multiple women. 2 R-worded by illegal immigrants in my town. Only one side's endorsing letting those people into our country, those criminals, the scum of the earth, with no checks, no nothing. So whatever, we're talking about finances today, but I'm getting riled up over the unchecked immigration, the idiot mouth breathers who are letting it happen, okay? No one knows what it means to be American. We need people who believe in American values to represent us when voting. Okay, and back to Plato real quick. the rule by, true democracy, Plato essentially said it's rule by the mentally ill because no one can agree with themselves. And when you have a government body that is in constant disagreement, okay, fractured, the minds of the citizens under that system will mirror that. You see all these people arguing with themselves in the street. You see all these people debating with entities that aren't there. That's what our Congress looks like, when they're arguing. Whatever. So there's not much agreement. It takes so long to get anything done in our democracy, quote unquote democracy. But
Right.
what do you guys think in the comments? Chat, what do you think? Am I a Trump tard for believing in right versus left?
Well, Saturn Rooster had a comment that I'm more on the side that like I don't think voting matters personally, and he made the point that voting is like participation in a corrupt system, which makes one guilty. Which to an extent I somewhat it's like
what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose, people? You're so cool you can't show up for 30 minutes and maybe spare one woman from getting raped next year. Maybe 30 minutes of your day you can't spare one woman from getting R-worded.
Preventing the rapes though, like Trump stopped mass deportations. Like
that's not true. That's not true.
Not true.
You saw it on TV. They're still hauling people out of businesses down here on the front lines.
Okay.
Down here on the front lines, we're seeing results. Sorry, people. Here in Lake Worth Beach, where we have like a quarter of the population is illegals from Guatemala, that has dropped drastically since the Trump crackdowns. Now, yes, you're right, Merlin, that he has been listening to corrupt sheriffs who are actually so apathetic because the prosecutors are jamming their toes in every chance. You have, I'm going to be specific, Merlin, you're right, but let's get specific with it. It's sheriffs like Judd Brady, right? Brady Judd, Brady Judd, who, even though he's nationalistic, patriotic on everything else, he's telling Trump, he's making video requests, public open letters to Trump saying, we need to soften our stance on immigration. So with all due respect, Merlin, Trump is listening to tons and tons of sheriffs who are saying we don't have the means to put all of our resources to this right now, because Trump was saying put all our resources to it right now. That went on for a couple months. You're right, they had to reel it back, but we are still seeing dozens of deportations like every day over here.
Well, the other thing I would add to it is, whether it's a perfect system or a very flawed system, it's our system, right? The government is our system. The law is our law. And like any tool, right? If you know how to use a hammer, you can do really good things with it, right? If you know not only know your rights, but you know the law in and out to a degree that you could stand up for yourself in a courtroom, well, then you really have rights, right? And, I kind of view the politics as the same way in that they've been very corrupt in our lifetime. However, here's what I would say. The Overton window has shifted dramatically. And while you have the older boomer generation that are very lost in the kind of Fox News propaganda that we've gotten over the last 20 years, specifically related to our special ally, the younger generations are very much awake to that relationship and a lot of different things. And the worldviews are actually getting a lot more, they've ruined the word conservative. The worldviews are getting a lot more traditional amongst the younger generations. I mean, it's a wide split. The people that aren't awake are lost, but the people that are awake are moving much more toward tradition. And Florida is a really great test case and a great example right now. And I know people say, oh, is he fake? Is he real? I don't know. A lot of people are full of shit. You don't know until they get in there. But the rhetoric is what I'm talking about. You have James Fishback running in Florida right now.
Hell yeah.
And the rhetoric is reflective of an Overton window that has shifted dramatically. And that should give us all hope, because we need young politicians with the rhetoric of James Fishback. And hopefully he's the real deal. We'll find out. Time will tell. But the rhetoric of James Fishback in all 50 states.
Yeah.
And when that's going to happen, we're going to see more and more of that, especially if Fishback wins, right? And now you have everyone. I saw someone say in the comments, oh, no, I had to vote for Randy Fine. You don't have to vote for him next time, because Dan Brazilian is running against him in Florida. So you are seeing the Overton window has shifted because the youth of America has woken up. So what the Republican Party was 5 years ago, it's not today. And what the Republican Party is today is not what it's going to be 15 years ago, because right now we have a two-party system, so we have to take the parties back. You can't just give up ground. We have to take them. We have to seize them. Power isn't something that's handed to you. Power is something that you have to go out and take. And don't let them take your power by convincing you that you have none, because you do.
100%. And I just want to reiterate, guys. Okay. Just want to reiterate. I would love if you guys could all vote Republican. I'm a shill. I'm a Republican shill. Okay. No one's paying me. It's just me saying this. Please vote red. The way prosecutors work, okay, this is the most real, this is the way that your voting is going to matter in your life the most, okay? It's not you're voting and then we're going to enter a golden age and everything's going to be free and everything's going to be this or that, okay? No, prosecutors either charge criminals and imprison them and either fight to the very end to imprison them, or they're lazy and they're paid off or hand selected by George Soros. Okay. Vote red, get good prosecutors in there who will actually imprison criminals. That's real life results. Screw your fucking Bilderberg groups. Screw your shit. Screw this and that. Your moon landing, this and that. People, please. This is real world. If you have a daughter, if you have a mom, if you have a wife, okay, do the bare minimum to protect them. Carry a gun, this and that. Okay, yeah, I get it. Vote red so that we have prosecutors who, when a 30-time career felon comes across their desk, they say, enough's enough. Prison, deportation, you name it. We need law and order, people. Law and order. Vote Republican. What do you have to lose? You're going to feel silly when some Epstein files drop? Whatever. Grow up. Grow the fuck up. There are women getting R-worded daily because we have corrupt prosecutors who are hand-selected, okay, by blue politicians, and our women and children suffer for it. We're not letting America fall into Europe's hand. Put the financial side stuff to aside for a sec. That can get bad. That can get real bad. We're not letting another woman get brutalized by some crazed Haitian lunatic. Hell no. Not in my America. No way. Vote red till you're dead. I don't care if you feel silly. It'll be worth it. That's my 2 cents. I'm not speaking for the other two panelists, but that's my 2 cents. Vote red till you're dead. You won't regret it. Do your best to choose the good ones. And I agree about Fishback. If the number one criticism you hear about someone is that they're too good to be true, bye, and just see what happens. Okay.
I agree completely. A big thing we can definitely agree on is these liberal judges are out of control. Like the things they're letting go and the people they're re-releasing over and over. Like talk about how like central banks harm the people. These judges are actively harming the people, letting these repeat offenders out and out until they do the most heinous thing, and then suddenly they're found mentally incompetent and can't stand trial. It's just absolutely insane, dude.
It's insane. Guys, America's under attack. White women and white children are not safe. It's bad. I don't want you to live in fear or live in danger, don't live in fear. But we need to call it how it is. Again, from the front lines, it's pretty bad over here. Okay? Even in the gun-loving state of Florida, crime is out of control. Black crime is out of control. Brown crime, you name it, it's out of control. Okay? America's looking a lot different than the one that our founding fathers fought for, than the one that our World War II veterans fought for. Okay. The finances is just one side of it, but let's get back to that. Excuse us. Excuse me. Getting all riled up.
My bad, dude.
No, you're good. But guys, what do you have to lose from voting 30 minutes out of your day? Did the Illuminati really get you that bad? You gonna feel that silly? No. Grow up. All right. Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, Jackson killed the bank. That's too blurry to keep on screen, I think. But he was so proud that he killed the bank. That was his greatest accomplishment, like I said earlier. This is Woodrow Wilson, though. This is an interesting quote. I am a most unhappy man. This is the guy who signed in the Federal Reserve, guys. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. The man who signed the Federal Reserve Act.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've bashed Wilson a lot because, I mean, he clearly messed up with the income tax, the Federal Reserve, getting us into World War One. Trying to push globalism with the League of Nations. But then I hear the people of his day that I respected talk about him, and they're like, no, Woodrow's a good guy. And then I see his quote. He's like, I'm a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. And it kind of makes me think, like, man, maybe he just got worked. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Well, if regrets were worth more than our actions, we would all be sinless. You know what I mean? We'd all gain entry to heaven, right? So he may have had a conscience, but it happened under his watch. Isn't that true?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he, in my opinion, is easily one of the 5 worst presidents in American history. I would think probably the worst. But it is interesting to see that quote. And I'd like to look more into that. And
it just kind of shows how, like, even the most powerful people, or quote powerful people in the world, are really pawns of the true power. Like the Clintons and this and that and the other, the people who, like, people who are known, they're all pawns. They're not the ones doing the actual moving of the pieces. Their pieces being moved. They're the chess pieces, not the chess players.
Totally. Wait one sec. There we go.
Yeah, if you want to relate that more to the Federal Reserve and right, because this is a good transition or a good segue. So, Dr. Longo, did you want to get into a little bit about? I know you brought it up before, that 1907 crash, and then or not, but if you want to, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Pujo Committee, because it's a really interesting history.
Yeah. So there had been bankruptcy scares, and real bankruptcy. There had been runs on the banks. That's what they say. Oh, the system, we need a better system. We need a better system. Actually, it was really just some Wall Street scamming going on. People got spooked a couple times, and then they'd all run to their banks. So that there'd be this great investment opportunity. People would pour all their money into this investment, average citizens. And then something in the news, some triggered event or some news story would spook everyone and be like, oh, that investment, that's not an option. Oh, that Colorado's had more snow this year than last 100 years. All bets are off. That investment is no good. People would say, holy shit, I need to get my money out. I need to go call my financial advisor, get my money out. They'd go running to the bank because of what they saw in the news, right? It's like Grand Theft Auto when you blow up the Sprite trucks and the Coca-Cola stock goes up, or you blow up the Coca-Cola truck and like the Dr. Pepper stock goes up. It really would happen like that. People would see something in the news and they'd run to the bank, many of them at the same time, because the news was not at your fingertips. Everyone got it at the same time a lot of the time. Or they'd run to the bank and all demand to take their money out at the same time. This is the ultimate fear of fractional reserve bankers, that everyone's going to want their money back at once. Through hundreds of years of study and black magic and whatever, the powers that be, the cabal, the banking cabal, at the root of evil in the world, they concocted this plan, fractional reserve banking, this method, right? It's like a little cup trick almost, that like a gypsy would do on a street corner, right? It's basically bankers somewhere along the line realized, if 100, or let's just say 10, if 10 people entrusted me with their money, that over time, only a couple of them, maybe only one on average, would actually come back seeking the total of the money they'd put in. So we're using loose math here, rough math, but 1 out of 10, which is where you get this 1 out of 9, or 1/10 or 1/9, basically, is usually what you see for fractional reserve banking. You only need to have 1 million or $1 for every $9 entrusted to a bank, deposited into a bank. If I go and open an account with Wells Fargo and I give them $1 million and 9 other people join the bank and give them, $1 million, you'd think that $10 million are sitting in the bank, right? Because we all just gave them we just gave them $1 million each. Well, actually, banks don't just receive money. They don't just protect money. They also loan money. So the game you have going on here is, let's say that they've been given 10 million by 10 separate people. They can now loan out close to 90 million. Okay. Or they can loan that 10 million away and they only need to keep 1 million in reserves. So a 10th or a 9th or somewhere around there is usually that average, that sweet spot, where it's almost like insurance. You pay insurance, but only, out of 1,000 people that pay insurance, maybe only 1 every year actually has to use it, or 10 or 100. It works out in the favor of the insurer. And it may seem like it's this fund that's being, filled up, piled up. I'm putting money into this. Other people are putting money into this. This pile is piling high in the bank. No, they're keeping that pile as small as they can while lending out as much as they can. That's the basic dumb explanation of fractional reserve banking. I don't know too much more than that, but I know that's essentially how it works. That
True.
You can loan out 9 times, roughly, what you have in your reserves. That's a legal right that banks have in most of the world. If 10 people give them money, They only really have to hold on to one of their, one of those, and they can loan out the other 10 people's money, assuming they were all like the same account size. That on a grand scale can happen to countries too. But blah, blah, blah. That's fractional reserve banking. And when you hear words like usury, okay, then we're getting into the area of how we charge interest. Imagine charging interest on, I have $1, Merlin has $0. He needs to borrow $1 from me, so I give him $1. But that's my only dollar, so I'm at a disadvantage. I'm at a, he's kind of, he's pressing me for a favor, and it may be hard for me to pull off, but I'm going to pull it off. And in order to incentivize me to give him my only dollar, he'll say, well, I'll give you $1.10 back. $1.10 back. And I'll say, okay, that's pretty nice, because then that 10 cents will make up for my inconvenience, right? Interest isn't that bad, right? Come on, interest, it helps people do good business. It helps people get money moving, right? Well, when you're charging interest, remember that fractional reserve thing? When we're charging interest on the money that's been loaned out and doesn't exist, then you get into some real trouble. Then you get into astronomical levels of debt, made up money. What you owe is fake money that's been borrowed against fake money, that is backed up by fake money. You name it. It's too confusing to explain. That's fractional reserve banking and usury in a nutshell. Not only is interest arguably immoral and unethical to begin with, but when you're charging interest on money that is literally floating in nothingness, right? People put $10 million in this bank. There's only $1 million in there, but everyone in town thinks there's $10 million in the bank. So going back to those bank runs, when people did demand more money than the bank had inside, what option does the bank have? You collapse. You close. You can't give everyone their money. You give those who you can at first, but as more and more people come to demand their money, you're going to reach empty because you had 10 million, deposited in the bank. They loaned out 9 of that. They only have 1 million left. That 1 million's gone when the first or couple customers come to take their money back. And then what? Most of these banks would literally, or the people who ran them would change their names, put on a disguise, and skip town because that's the only thing you could do. It was tar and feather, pitchforks. These were the bank runs on the bank. And, the financial institution sometimes likes to paint it like the citizens were ganging up on the banks, right? They were demanding their money too ferociously. And that's what caused the banks to shut down. If they'd only given time and not overreacted to what was in the news, everything would be okay. But whatever. Bank run just makes it sound like it was a bunch of teenagers pranking the bank almost, but it's the bank ripping people off in unimaginable ways on a level that can only be equated to black magic, because you've fooled people so ruthlessly. And we live in that system where the usury and the interest are the norm, the status quo. So what do you guys think? Any additions or corrections on that?
Yeah, no, I think you did a good job with it. So if I could jump in from there. So you have 1912 and you have Charles Lindbergh Sr., who is an absolute legend. And he starts a campaign basically saying that Wall Street and a few powerful banking people have way too much power in the banking system. And anyway, he's able to get the Congressional Pujo Committee put together. And in this committee, just absolutely goes at them. And not only goes at them, and this is what everyone should read about the Pujo Committee and like look into it, but actually names the names. So I'm gonna read here. The report revealed that at least 18 different major financial corporations were under the control of a cartel led by J.P. Morgan, George F. Baker, and James Stillman. These three men, through the resources of 7 banks and trust companies, controlled an estimated $2.1 billion. The report revealed that a handful of men held manipulative control of the New York Stock Exchange and attempted to evade interstate trade laws. The Pujo report singled out individual bankers, including Paul Warburg, right? These are the Rothschild guys he singles out. Paul Warburg, Jacob Schiff, Felix M. Warburg, Frank E. Peabody, that's Rockefeller, William Rockefeller, and Benjamin Strong. So Lindbergh goes on this public crusade, calls out J.P. Morgan, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, names the names, shows all the finances. So never let a good crisis go to waste. J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, they just start a big propaganda campaign. Rather than saying, oh, no, look, this is happening, they go, can you believe this is happening? Can you believe this small group has all this power? We need to do something about this. They take the Pujo Committee through a propaganda campaign and start to convince the public that the way to solve this problem is introducing something called the Federal Reserve Act. So they completely do a 180 on the Pujo Committee and say, yeah, there is this problem. We need to do something about it. Here, the Federal Reserve Act will really stick it to these bankers. And that's what the public believe. Now, Lindbergh is kicking and screaming, but, it's hard to kick and scream through all the propaganda. So this is a quote from Charles Lindbergh at the time, who was trying to raise the alarm. Charles Lindbergh, and I quote, "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this bill, the invisible government by the monetary power will be legalized. The people may not know it immediately, but the day of reckoning is only a few years removed. The worst legislative crime of the ages is perpetrated in this banking bill." Charles Lindbergh about the Federal Reserve Act before it was passed, trying to warn the people. He would go on to write a book which was called, I believe, Wall Street and the Banking Trust. That might be wrong, or Wall Street and the Money Trust. And he tried to put this book out to spread awareness about what was going on. Not only did these powerful bankers use their influence and their leverage to take his book out of circulation, but they actually had the printing plates of the book destroyed.
That's actually crazy. They destroyed the printing plates of the book because it was that dangerous to them.
Well,
he wrote two of them. He wrote the Money Trust, and he wrote a book about how they were trying to, the money powers were actually behind World War I, and that it wasn't what the public was told. And they destroyed the printing plates on that book as well.
Oh, wow. So, Brett, did I ever talk to you about Eustace Mullins and the Federal Reserve?
You've brought it up. Get into it.
So, when I first heard about the Federal Reserve, it was from, I think, probably a Robert Sepper video like 10 years ago. And he said he had G. Edward Griffith, and he had, or Edward G. Griffith, I forget.
I think it's G. Edward.
And then Timothy Bence. So he made a video that kind of combined the research of G. Edward Griffith, the creature.
G. Edward Griffin.
Griffin, thank you. Who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island. But I never knew that was actually, he actually kind of, not to be a douche or anything, but he kind of he should have given Eustace Mullins some credit because he kind of took the whole idea for that book. And someone told me this in the store. I forget his name, but a gentleman with his kids came into the store and was visiting and told me about that. About how Ezra Pound. You guys know Ezra Pound?
Mm-hmm. Based.
Writer, poet. Ezra Pound, guys, was a fan. No, sorry, other way around. Eustace Mullins was a fan of Ezra Pound and had heard that he was like in some mental institution or down on his luck. Eustace Mullins would visit him, and Ezra Pound was begging him, dude, you've got to help me make a book about the Federal Reserve and Jekyll Island. I don't know how much it talked about Jekyll Island, but here, let's look this up.
There was like a chapter on Jekyll Island in the book. I just read through most of it.
The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. It's a whole Eustace Mullins. And of course, is he the guy who made what else did he write? That was very
that red book is interesting too. I think he has like the there's one about like the people that run the world or something like that. Like about like secret society type stuff.
Yeah, he's been labeled an anti-Semite and all, the whole deal. But Ezra Pound also, labeled labeled. He kind of earned the label, but Ezra Pound, funny guy, and Eustace Mullins assisted him, or took his advice, listened, learned from him, and eventually went and wrote this book. And I was blown away that, as much as I've heard G. Edward Griffin talk about The Creature from Jekyll Island, he wrote the book about it, he never really mentioned this. So I don't know if he didn't know about it, but I would have liked to have known about this. I only recently found out about it. But Eustace Mullins, shout out to him. And
he has a lot of good stuff on YouTube, actually. There's a lot of interviews of him on YouTube. Eustace Mullins.
Hell yeah. But yeah. So Jekyll Island. Let's I've got a little website here. We're gonna hear from the Fed themselves. This is right from the horse's mouth, okay? NewYorkFed.org. The founding of the Fed, 1791, the first bank of the United States. We kind of went over, a bit of this. After Alexander Hamilton spearheaded a movement advocating the creation of a central bank, the first bank of the United States was established in 1791. The first bank of the United States had a capital stock of $10 million, $2 million of which was subscribed by the federal government, while the remainder was subscribed by private individuals. Blah, 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 blah. First Bank of the United States was headquartered in Philadelphia, but had branches in other major cities. It was a nationwide bank and was in fact the largest corporation in the United States. As a result of its influence, the bank was of considerable use to both American commerce and the federal government. However, the bank's influence was frightening to many people. The bank's charter ran for 20 years, and when it expired in 1811, a proposal to renew the charter failed by the margin of a single vote in each house of Congress. Chaos quickly ensued, brought on by the War of 1812 and by the lack of a central regulating mechanism over banking and credit. 1816, the second Bank of the United States. The situation deteriorated to such an extent that in 1816, a bill to charter a second Bank of the United States was introduced in Congress. The bill narrowly passed both houses and was signed into law by President James Madison. Henry Clay, Speaker of the House, cited the force of circumstance and the lights of experience as reasons for this realization of the importance of a central bank to the U.S. economy. blah, blah, blah. We can skip along here. National Banking Act of 1863 sought to add clarity and security to the banking system by introducing and promoting currency notes issued by nationally chartered banks rather than state chartered ones. So a move towards more federal system.
The argument they always use is convenience. Oh, there's too many different currencies. Let's just nationalize it. It'll be so much
Right.
easier for you. Oh,
Right.
that'd be so good. Oh, you can just go for some digital ID. It'll be so easy. Just pay with a little chip in your
Exactly.
hand. It'll be so easy.
Yeah, all those messy little languages and cultural identities. Yeah, let's just brown that out and make everyone a UN citizen. One currency, one language, one media slop bowl, you
Mhm.
know. So yeah, it sounds like globalization to me in a way, right? Getting everyone on the same program like that overrides. It's like, I don't know. We're so far removed from the concept of like a local money that it's just so scary to us. Like, it's so foreign, and people need to realize what we have right now is not necessarily, it's not better. It's not more reassuring. It's not infinitely more stable.
Yeah. Like monarchy you were talking about earlier. It's so foreign that it's been, so demonized essentially that we can't even comprehend it.
Right. We're here. In 1907, a severe financial panic jolted Wall Street and forced several banks into failure. This bank, however, did not trigger a broad financial collapse. Yet the simultaneous occurrence of general prosperity with a crisis in the nation's financial centers persuaded many Americans that their banking structure was sadly out of date and in need of major reform. A little bit of gaslighting going on here. The simultaneous occurrence of general prosperity with crisis in the nation's financial centers. Who cares about the crisis in financial centers if the people are prospering? Shouldn't the financial centers only be there to help the people prosper? Whatever. But this is kind of what Brett was touching on. Like, they need to convince people that we needed the Federal Reserve so bad, right? 1908, the Congress created the National Monetary Commission. This commission, led by Nelson Aldrich and composed of members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, was charged with making a comprehensive study of the necessary and desirable changes to the banking system of the United States. The resulting plan called for the National Reserve Association, which would be dominated by the banking industry. This plan was treated with great skepticism and received very little public support. In 1912, all right, so we're skipping to 1912. Well,
Before you get to 1912, so who was Nelson Aldrich's son-in-law?
Rockefeller.
Yes, that is the
Nelson or someone else.
The father-in-law of John D. Rockefeller Jr. is that Nelson Aldrich.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and also we would have another Rockefeller, a Nelson Rockefeller, who was governor, I believe, for a time. Mayor or governor? I forget.
He would be vice president.
Vice president. Was he also a governor?
Yes, that is the grandchild or great-grandchild, grandchild of Nelson Aldrich and the son of John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Jr.
Well, Nelson was the 49th governor of New York and vice president to Gerald Ford. The name comes from Nelson Aldrich. That's a family name that was then passed down to Nelson Rockefeller. So there you go, folks, and also, well, we'll get to the Warburgs, but what happens in this gap between 1908 and 1912? That's the real meat and potatoes of what we're talking about. The Jekyll Island meeting. Let me go to another website here. Jekyll Island meeting. You guys can go to Jekyll Island. You can go see the place where they did it. It's open to the public certain times a day. You can take a tour of the Federal Reserve Room. You can see, some of like the paintings and the stained glass they have in there. Pretty cool spot. Go check out my Jekyll Island video if you haven't already. But now we're on federalreservehistory.org. Okay. The meeting at Jekyll Island. This is the big event that we've been building up to. Okay. This is the conception of the Federal Reserve. So between 1908 and 1912, this commission, their job is to come up with a new, better system. Well, that's not what they do. In fact, between 6 and 8 of these men, or their representatives of the wealthiest families in the world, made a secret trip to Jekyll Island, Georgia, just over the Florida state line. They left in the dark of night, in the middle of the night. They traveled by night, hid during the day. And they went to Jekyll Island to do the Federal Reserve, to come up with it, to come up with the rules, the little favors that they were going to do to each other, all the things they couldn't have on the record in Congress or in the drafting tables of a government building, right, where they're coming up with these ideas. They had to do that in private. That's why they needed to go to Jekyll Island. Now, something to know about Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island didn't have a bridge until I think the 50s or 60s. Maybe the 40s, I forget. But back in 1910, the 19-teens, you couldn't drive to Jekyll Island. Okay? Very exclusive. It was like Nantucket. Before they built the bridge to Jekyll Island, it was just like Nantucket Island. The rich are separated by water from the common people, right? On that island, they're almost not even a part of the United States. Jekyll Island was not part of Georgia until, I think, 1947. That's a pretty interesting year. 46, 47, around there. Same time Israel got its,
statehood.
Yeah. So this Jekyll Island meeting was done at Jekyll Island, number one, because it was already a favored vacation spot for the richest in America, but also because, like I said, it was on the same latitude as Jerusalem, so that's a pretty good indicator. It was a wealthy vacation spot. They say up to a third of the world's wealth could be found on Jekyll Island some weekends. You had the Rockefellers there. You had the Goodyears there. You had the, who was it? Pulitzer or some other family, writing, publishing family. Goodyear, the Rockefellers. Who else? Well,
I forget who else, but they treated it like a wealthy timeshare, essentially, where they kind of, did like a little literal timeshare there. And during the Jekyll Island meeting, they told everyone else, hey, you can't come here for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, we're shutting it down.
Yeah. Yeah. So here, let's read about this secret meeting. Okay. And this is from the horse's mouth. Okay. We might be able to add some stuff to this, but if they're willing to admit this much, imagine what they won't admit, right? A secret gathering at a secluded island off the coast of Georgia in 1910 laid the foundations for the Federal Reserve System. This is a picture of the old clubhouse at Jekyll Island. That tower. I've been in that tower. It's cool.
They called those cottages. They called those mansions cottages. That was their nickname for them. Freaking crazy.
Yeah. In November of 1910, 6 men, Nelson Aldrich, A. Piot Andrew, Henry Davison, Arthur Shelton, Frank Vanderlip, and Paul Warburg met at the Jekyll Island Club off the coast of Georgia to write a plan to reform the nation's banking system. The meeting and its purpose were closely guarded secrets, and participants did not admit that the meeting occurred until the 1930s. They denied this had even existed. And by the way, talk about gaslighting. These people were putting printed on record accounts saying, I promise there was no secret meeting in Jekyll Island. I promise we had nothing to do with that whole Federal Reserve business. I promise. They wrote all this in all the newspapers because people were suspicious. Okay, their absences were noticed. And then they lied to people's face for 20 plus years. And then a couple of these guys wrote memoirs bragging about how they did it and about how they lied and how easy it was to lie, how easy it was to dupe everyone. So yeah, guys, not a great group of people here. The Federal Reserve Commission, whatever you want to call them, National Monetary Commission, these six representatives of the wealthiest men in the world. Now, a lot of people like to talk about the Rothschilds. Not many people are familiar with the Warburgs. The Warburgs are essentially the American Rothschilds. The Warburgs married into the Rothschild family. That had been true before this happened, I believe. Who's seen Annie? The play, Annie? Orphan Annie? Daddy Warbucks? Daddy Warbucks? Who do you think Daddy Warbucks is named after? Modeled after?
Interesting.
Warburg.
Another interesting theme is you see the intermarriage between Warburg and the Rothschilds, and then Aldrich and Rockefeller. You almost wonder if these are arranged marriages for the purpose of power consolidation.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I always say this. What's the point of being filthy rich and evil if your kids aren't going to be filthy rich and evil? You know what I mean? What's the point? All that work for nothing. The same way a farmer wants to see his good land and his hard work be continued on. These evil scum also want to see their kids pick up where they left off, And by the way, evil people a lot of times love their kids as much as you do and want to see them succeed and, in their own definition of success. That's why, just to bring it back to Jesus for a second, that's why Jesus promotes a new way, a better way. Yes, any man can love his kid, okay? Any man can love his child. Seriously. Can you love the child of your enemy? Can you have mercy on the child of your enemy or your enemy himself, And I know people disagree about the enemy, the definition of enemy back then, whether it was like a debating, opponent or whether it was actually your enemy at arms is a, bit of a controversy. But people think that like loving their family is all. This sounds so bad. I don't have kids, okay, but loving your kids is not all there is to it. That's not it. Evil people can achieve that too. And you need to push that bubble of compassion further outside of your own tiny little family. That's Jesus's message. That's Jesus's vision for the futures. So that's just the point real quick is don't be surprised when evil people do good things for their own family. And don't let them off the hook because they, seemingly redeemed themselves in some way, or oh, but he loved his son, he loved his daughter, he was a troubled man, but he provided for his kids and this and that. Yeah, but at what cost? What are they doing to provide for their kids? All right.
And just a real quick, very relevant example of a marriage to consolidate power: Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner.
That one stings.
Sorry, man, but that's so it, dude. Like, Jared Kushner is
Yeah.
so influential in the administration. That's undeniable. Like that was to consolidate power, I think.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah, Jared Kushner. No good. He's got the blank stare. He's got the AI pupils. You guys notice that? Black pupils, blank stare in the
Yeah.
eyes. Looks like a phone screen when you look in his eyes.
Yeah. And they're over there doing these sort of shady deals over in Iran,
Yeah. All right, let's keep reading. The need for reform. At the time, the men who met on Jekyll Island believed the banking system suffered from serious problems. The Jekyll Island participants' views on the issue are well known. Since before and after their conclave, several spoke publicly, and others published extensively on the topic. Collectively, they encapsulated their concerns in the plan they wrote on Jekyll Island and in the reports of the National Monetary Commission. Like many Americans, these men were concerned with financial panics, which had disrupted economic activity in the United States periodically during the 19th century. Nationwide panics occurred on average every 15 years. These panics forced financial institutions to suspend operations, triggering long and deep recessions. American banks held large enough required reserves of cash, but these reserves were scattered throughout the nation, held in the vaults of thousands of banks or as deposits in financial institutions in designated reserve and central reserve cities. During crises, they became frozen in place, preventing them from being used to alleviate the situation. During booms, banks' excess reserves tended to flow toward big cities, especially New York, where bankers invested them in call loans, which were loans repayable on demand to brokers. The brokers in turn loaned the funds to investors speculating in equity markets, whose stock purchases served as collateral for the transactions. This American system made bank reserves immobile and equity markets volatile, a recipe for financial instability. Sorry, we're not going to read all this, but that's the case they're making for why we needed the Federal Reserve. We see here Paul Warburg, successful German-born financier who was a partner at the investment bank Kuhn, Loeb & Co., widely regarded as an expert on the banking systems in the United States and Europe, wrote that the United States' financial system was, quote, at about the same point that had been reached by Europe at the time of the Medicis, and by Asia, in all likelihood, after the time of Hammurabi. Jeez.
What, some youths over there?
Yeah, I got some hoodlums outside
Oh
of
no.
Yeah, judge had let them off. They've been arrested 20 times.
Yeah, Soros prosecutors been sending their goons to disrupt my stream.
Those damn youths.
Yeah. So loud. Jeez.
My cat just sneezed in my face.
Here, Bud Bear 33 with the $33, Illuminati confirmed, says, great to see Classical Learner and Narco Longo live. I guess the wizard guy is okay too. Yeah, he's all right. These people are so annoying. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay.
Like, just faintly once in a while in the background.
Van Norris with the $20 says, great review of stuff I already know, but worth it. Great explanation of the democracy psyop. Many need to hear this. Agreed. What's this duck hunt thing? I didn't know about this. By the fall of 1910, Aldrich was persuaded of the necessity of a central bank for the United States. With Congress ready to begin meeting in just a few weeks, Aldrich, most likely at Davison's suggestion, decided to convene a small group to help him synthesize all he had learned and write down a proposal to establish a central bank. The group included Aldrich, his private secretary, Arthur Shelton, Davison, Andrew, who by 1910 had been appointed Assistant Treasury Secretary, Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank, and a former Treasury official, and Warburg. A member of the exclusive Jekyll Island Club, most likely J.P. Morgan, arranged for the group to use the club's facilities. Founded in 1886, the club's membership boasted elites such as Morgan, Marshall Field, and William Kissam Vanderbilt I, whose mansion-sized cottages dotted the island. Munsey's magazine described it in 1904 as, quote, the richest, the most exclusive, the most inaccessible club in the world. Here's the train station that they went down to before getting off to take a ferry to Jekyll Island, Brunswick, Georgia. Aldrich and Davison chose the attendees for their expertise, but Aldrich knew their ties to Wall Street could arouse suspicion about their motives and threaten the bill's political passage. So he went to great lengths to keep the meeting secret, adopting the ruse of a duck hunting trip and instructing the men to come one at a time to a train terminal in New Jersey, where they could board his private train car. Once aboard, the men used only first names: Nelson, Harry, Frank, Paul, Piot, and Arthur, to prevent the staff from learning their identities. For decades after, the group referred to themselves as the First Name Club. An additional member of the first... They're brown, by the way. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. Benjamin Strong, vice president of the Bankers Trust Company and the future founding chief executive officer, then called governor, now called president, of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. But it is unlikely Strong attended the meeting on Jekyll Island. In his autobiography, Vanderlip recalls him attending, but no other account indicates Strong's presence. Most scholars and journalists who have written about the issue, including Bertie Charles Forbes, the founder of Forbes magazine, and the journalist who first revealed the meetings in an article in 1916, have concluded Strong did not attend. Strong had worked closely with the Jekyll Island attendees in other venues, however, and his ideas were certainly present at the meeting, even if he was not there in person. After the meeting, as the First Name Club revised the plan and prepared it for publication, Strong was frequently consulted and, according to Forbes, quote, joined the First Name Club as Ben. So, that's the secret meeting.
I like how they phrase it at the beginning where it's like, oh, by 1910, Aldrich was convinced that we needed a central bank, as if it was so difficult to convince this banker that we wanted a central bank for the U.S. Like, oh, yeah, you know, and it just shows like how like framing and phrasing things can totally sway public opinion. And that's why they brag about how easy it is to lie and dupe people, because it is. It's very easy to lie and dupe, sadly.
Yeah, totally. And also, hey, all right, guys, all right. I guess you convinced me to hand out free money to my friends, you know, and my financiers. But,
to my daughter and her husband.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. So
twist my arm, why don't you? I guess we'll do it at fractional reserve rates too.
I guess I'll give my daughter's family a monopoly over the printing of the dollar. I don't know.
Yeah. For real.
I guess we'll buy up all the media while we do it if we have to.
The plan takes shape. Aldrich and his colleagues quickly realized that while they agreed on some broad principles, establishing an elastic currency supplied by a bank that held the reserves of all banks, they disagreed on details. Figuring out those details was a, quote, desperately trying undertaking.
No, I
Warburg-
get 20%, 25%.
Yeah. In Warburg's words, completely secluded, the men woke up early and worked late into the night for more than a week. It was 10 days, if I'm not mistaken, the 20th to the 30th. We had disappeared from the world onto a deserted island, Vanderlip recalled in his autobiography. We put in the most intense period of work that I have ever had. Yeah, sitting at that table for 9 hours a day in the air conditioning and eating grapes and drinking wine. It was the worst, most grueling work I ever did.
I
But,
mean, never mind. We won't talk about how certain people view having to do any bit of labor, so let's not go there.
yeah. By the end of their time on Jekyll Island, Aldrich and his colleagues had developed a plan for a Reserve Association of America, RAA, RAA, Reserve Association of America, RAA. A single central bank with 15 branches across the country. Each branch would be governed by boards of directors elected by the member banks in each district, with larger banks getting more votes. The branches would be responsible for holding the reserves of their member banks, issuing currency, discounting commercial paper, transferring balances between branches, and check clearing and collection. The national body would set discount rates for the system as a whole and buy and sell securities. Shortly after returning home, Aldrich became ill and was unable to write the group's final report. They probably poisoned him because he was giving him too much trouble or something. I don't know. So Vanderlip and Strong traveled to Washington to get the plan ready for Congress. Aldrich presented it to the National Monetary Commission in January of 1911 without telling the commission members how the plan had been developed. A final report, along with legislative text, went to Congress a year later with a few minor changes, including naming the new institution the National Reserve Association, the NRA. All right. Lots more to read here, but now we're kind of getting to Titanic time period. What was that? 1912, the Titanic?
What's crazy is this whole big plan came to fruition and like nobody knew where it came from, and that was sort of new at the time. But think about bills today. We have these 5,000 page bills going through Congress that nobody can read, right? So it's like it's literally gotten worse since then, you know?
Yeah. Oh, totally. So, now we're at like 1911, 1912. There was one more obstacle that had to be cleared before the Federal Reserve could fully, have its way. There were allegedly a couple opponents to the Federal Reserve System who had much influence in America. John Jacob Astor, Guggenheim, what was his name? Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus. Guggenheim, Astor, and Straus. Those three, who were considered, I don't know if you'd call them like old money or what, compared to the Federal Reserve, movement, but they had more traditional American values, a traditional understanding of what it took to keep America afloat. Even if they were rich, even if they were out of touch with the everyday man, these three opponents to the Federal Reserve System, allegedly, it's hard to get good information on that. because they died in the Titanic. But these three opponents to the Federal Reserve, Guggenheim, Astor, and Strauss, all sank at the Titanic. How convenient. They were killed by an iceberg.
Isowitz.
Yeah, an Isakowski.
Well,
Just
and
kidding.
J.P. Morgan owned the Titanic.
Well, he didn't just own it. He funded the building of it, and he also paid to have it insured. So lucky for him.
What do you think about the theory of the Titanic being swapped with, was it the Olympic? Or
Yeah, Olympic, I think.
any validity to that, you think, or what? Like,
I
seen
don't
something like,
know. I
yeah,
don't know.
you know.
People say that like the rails are different on like the second story if you put
Yeah.
but who knows? Maybe they made some changes. Listen, I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah.
I would
Oh,
not put it
okay.
past them.
Yeah.
They could pull that off. People are that dumb. People that could be pulled off. Now there were survivors, so it's hard to account for all the survivors, but some people even think that they sunk the boat and then like lifted it back out of the water. It gets kind of ridiculous,
Bro,
But
imagine if they fucking torpedoed that thing, dude.
I don't know.
Crazy.
Biggest boat ever made falls victim to a run-of-the-mill iceberg that these captains had to know what they were doing, right? Like, did they really choose the dumbest, laziest captain around for the maiden voyage of the Titanic?
Yeah.
I don't know. They act like this captain had never heard of an iceberg before. That's literally how they tell the story. Like, we'll be fine. But captain, that looks kind of big. It's tiny. We'll push right through it.
Yeah.
He's just taking a shot every time he saw an iceberg.
For real.
It was the 13th iceberg he hit.
Oh yeah. So the Titanic is another big chapter in this sinister history. Thanks to and by the way, we've got Merlin here, a resident astrologer. Well, guys, J.P. Morgan was a bit of an astrologer himself. Okay. Now, you can believe in astrology if you want or not. These people do. He cared a lot about it. He had a one-of-a-kind pocket watch that would show him the movements of constellations and planets in the sky. It had like 5 hands on it. Poor people are walking around with 2 hands on their watch. The rich have 5, okay? He said, millionaires don't use astrology. Billionaires do. Now, he didn't write it down and sign his name next to it, but the fact that he had a one-of-a-kind astronomical pocket watch should be pretty good evidence that that's an accurate quote. J.P. Morgan not only funded the Titanic, paid to have it insured, okay? He actually was scheduled to leave and have a VIP suite, the most expensive suite on the whole boat. J.P. Morgan's scheduled to be on that voyage. And the day of, no warning, no advance notice, he doesn't get on the boat.
He pulled a fucking Lucky Larry, dude.
Decides not to go. Isn't that crazy? J.P. Morgan.
That's the same shit that happened at the Twin Towers, is it not?
Yeah.
That certain people just didn't show to work that day, and I insured it for terrorism insurance like 2 months beforehand.
And in context, that is probably the most powerful man in America at the time.
Yeah, J.P. Morgan. Well, Rockefeller replaced him for richest man in the world. Oh, allegedly.
They were. Morgan was the bank, right? That's like the Pujo committee. They were like, man, Morgan just controls everything.
Yeah. Yeah, J.P. Morgan. After 1907, the Panic of 1907, from what I've heard, J.P. Morgan single-handedly bailed out the American economy. Much of the banks, much of the financial institutions, he essentially bought them, bailed them out, bought them for pennies on the dollar, so that they would then, from then on, be subservient to him. If you picked up all the pieces and put it back together, that's your machine. That's your system, you know. So he's an opportunist. He either manufactured that whole thing to play into his hand, or he's just an opportunist, or he's a genius astrologer, you know, fill in the blank. But JP Morgan, bad hombre. And he also had a cottage on Jekyll Island, and the Vanderbilts. That's who we were blanking on earlier. The Morgans, Vanderbilts, Goodyear, a couple others.
All the tycoons.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, what else? Well, you know, one more side we have to get through is why Jekyll Island? We touched on that a little bit, but why there? Why couldn't they just get on a yacht and just go offshore if they wanted privacy? Why couldn't they just go to some other exclusive country club? Why didn't they just go to Nantucket or something? Who knows? Well, they chose this spot in Jekyll Island not just because of the good weather. The weather's actually not that good. Okay. It's one of the cloudiest places on the East Coast, Jekyll Island. If you go to Jekyll Island, the chances of it being overcast are extremely high. Extremely high. I've been there, I don't know, 5 times, and only once was it sunny. It was cloudy every single time. Something about how it juts out into the Atlantic. If you go look, I forget what they call this thing. It's the, if you look at, let me show you this. If you ever have looked at the coastline of America and been like, what the hell is this little thing? Well, this little thing is kind of like an outcrop. You might think it's like Cape Canaveral down here. But this little hump right there does something weird to the Gulf Stream up here. Okay. And essentially you get these weird currents around Jekyll Island. Go look at Jekyll Island. It's all dead trees washed up on the beach. Dead trees, like the skeleton of a forest, washed up on the beach. It's so eerie. So eerie. It looks like a haunted beach, you know, like a horror movie set. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So why did they choose Jekyll Island? Well, it's spooky. Overcast, spooky beach. Here you'll see what I mean. Guys, see this? Dead trees is what Jekyll Island is famous for. All these huge trees wash up, leafless, like skeletons, like dead bodies. Okay. Something about the current there is just all wrong. It's just all weird. It's cloudy. Everything washes up there, especially these dead trees. And then also, Jekyll Island originally used to be a whaling outpost. It used to be called how do we say this? La Isla de las Galenas, I believe. Island of the Whales. Whale Island. Whale Island. Isn't that crazy? Now, John D. Rockefeller, famous for oil, right? Oil tycoon. Bad. Fossil fuels, pollution. Oh, bad, bad, bad. we're dependent on this energy. One source of energy for like all of our vehicles. We're dependent on this. All in, one man's control. Well, hang on, guys. Some of you've heard me say this before. He deserves some credit, John D. Rockefeller. What was the number one fuel source in the world before we switched to gasoline?
Coal.
Whale fat.
Oh.
You know how long whales live? 100 years, 200, 300 years? Guys, we are not even close to bouncing back from the mass whale die-off, kill-off that we did up until John D. Rockefeller switched us off whale blubber, whale oil, and on to gasoline, petroleum, byproducts, kerosene, gasoline, not just the stuff in the cars, but torches, little lamps, every major city, almost every major city was fueling all their lamps, all their torches with whale oil. You know how expensive that was? How much that sucked for the whales? So John D. Rockefeller, it's almost like he made a bargain with the god Poseidon. I'm gonna say, God, I'm gonna save the whales. How as cruel as humanity's been to the whales, let me be that cruel back to humanity. Is like kind of what almost the bargain he made with God by freeing mankind. And I know this is out there. This is fucking retarded. It's wacky. But making a bargain, why does God let certain people get away with it? Well, maybe on some level it did serve, I'm not going to say a higher purpose, but a just cause on some level. Okay. Shifting things away from animal dependent energy. Now what? We're going to feel bad for the rocks, feel bad for, whatever. Well, Brett, I saw you've got to get going.
I'm fading, but I do got to say the Rockefellers, all this time, all they've really needed was to bring you in as their propaganda head. Could you imagine them running these commercials? Back when my great grandfather saved the precious whales that you wouldn't get to enjoy or see if we didn't save them with our oil. Get that whole campaign going.
Hey, it's kind of right. If that didn't happen, we'd be fishing whales out at an alarming rate to this day. So something needed to change. Something that, it reached a boiling point, or breaking point, tipping point. And I think God opened up a new avenue that maybe disadvantaged humans, but it helped the whales out. Who knows? I'm a fucking vegetarian, so that's where this is coming from. But Brett, dude, thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the gravy again. Go check out the last stream we did with Brett like a month ago on Florida's birthday, slavery, human trafficking, all that good stuff.
Thank you for having me. Love it. And we'll do it again soon.
Hell yeah, man. Guys, go sign up to Classical Learner if you haven't already. Get your kids enrolled.
Dr. Longo taught a course for us this semester. He has to get me one more video, and then we'll have the whole replay of that course available to you. And coming back in September, which I'm so fired up about, I just to say on air in front of all the people, I was really blown away by not only the depth of what you covered, but the professionalism you displayed when talking about some very difficult topics with a room full of young people, and it's very impressive. So thank you very much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, dude. Tell the kids I'll see them in September.
I'll let them know. Bye, guys.
Peace
See
out,
you,
Brett.
Brett. Yeah, guys. Shout out to Brett for joining us. He's a busy guy. Nice, big, got a nice, beautiful family and a lot on his plate. So we appreciate him being with us. And whereas me and Merlin, we don't have jack shit going on really. So
Nothing,
we
dude.
could just try, we could just shoot the shit forever. But man, there's one more chapter we gotta paint a good picture of before we can really hop off tonight.
All
And
right.
that is why Jekyll Island, why there. We've been trying to answer this, but the real climax, the real scandal here, the ultimate scandal is the ancient Indian black magic that was performed on that island. This is what makes the most sense. Jekyll Island, we were looking at it just over the Florida state line, was home to a couple different groups of Indians, American Indians. The Timucua are the ones we're really going to talk about, though. The Timucua, whatever. Timucua. The Timucua were a tribe who lived in Central and North Florida, pretty much from Tampa Bay to Jekyll Island. That was their territory, their range. And also where NASA launches their, Cape Canaveral, that's kind of like the southeasternmost range of their territory. What?
That's where they go to space. How neat.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. You could tie NASA into this all if you really wanted to, but the Timucua Indians who lived. Can you just search some pictures of Timucua Indians?
Yeah,
please?
sure. I got you. Timucua.
The Timucua lived near Jekyll Island, but that was the northernmost range of their territory.
It's up on my screen.
Thanks. The Timucua Indians were pretty terrifying. They're scary to say the least. Okay. According to the first Europeans who came here, the Timucua stood close to 7 feet tall, maybe even 8 feet tall. They said we had guys over 6 feet tall on the European expedition, and some of these Timucua Indians were 1.5 feet taller than their tallest European. We're talking NBA. We're talking NBA players over here, okay? We're talking 7-footers, 8-footers. No. See, this is fake news, okay? I hate to break it to you. This is fake news. This is fake news. CJ Trickstar, who I love, said the Europeans were like 5'2". That's not true. Some of them were, maybe, but that was the low end. Okay, they always want you to believe that everyone in the ancient past was fucking 5'0" and they died at 20 years old. That's what they need you to believe to justify all the pharmaceuticals that they fucking pump down your throats to keep you alive. That they want you to think is keeping you alive. Oh, the fluoride in the water is why you stay alive. The vitamins that you eat every day is why you stay alive. The comfy, air-conditioned lifestyle that you live is why we stay alive longer. No, that's not true. That's not true. It's a psyop to convince people that. Now, hey, people died. There was disease. Things weren't all smooth and easy back then. So yeah, there was more malnutrition. There was more disease. Totally. But saying everyone was fucking 5'2" is a total psyop, okay? 5'2" people did not conquer America, okay? You didn't have a bunch of Nick Fuentes running around conquering America. You had a bunch of Tom Brady's and Brad Pitts and fucking That's what you had conquering America. Okay. Taller than everyone else. Didn't happen by accident. But when they came to Florida, things were a little different, I'll be honest. Okay. The Maya were tiny. The Aztec were tiny. Many of the plains, some of the plains Indians were tiny. Some of them were really tall. In Florida, it's unanimously reported these guys were taller than the Europeans. And it's not because they were just 5'2", okay? It's because, by the way, just do some research. Pedro Menendez was 6'2", and he's one of the great conquistadors who came to Florida. Or sorry, Narvaez was 6'2". Panfilo de Narvaez was 6'2". And no one said he's the tallest guy on the mission. No one said, oh, he's the tallest guy we had. That was like average. 6'2" could be average back then too. And the Spanish were shorter than the French. So if the French are telling you these Indians are fucking huge, and the French are still some of the tallest people today, even though I hate to admit it, some of the French are extremely tall.
Oui, oui.
The French were taller than the Spanish on average, and they themselves are saying the Timucua Indians are 1.5 feet taller than us. That's pretty tall. Okay. So no, Europeans were not like 5'2". Okay. They still averaged close to 6 foot. Approaching 6 feet tall was not uncommon. Okay. People that are under 6'2" are the first to say some 5'2" shit. So true. But you know, there's some doors and forts in like St. Augustine that are pretty short, but there's other ones that are fucking huge. So short doorways in forts had more to do with cannonballs not being able to, you know, the shorter your doorway is, the less likely it is a fucking cannonball is going to fly into it. You know what I mean? Like, small doorways don't prove that everyone who lived there was a dwarf, right?
Yeah, Star Force were literally all about military strategy. And obviously, you know, like incredible intelligent design, but big time military strategy.
Now, also, I'll give you credit, okay? CJ, you were right. Ponce de Leon was 4'11". That is correct. You're right. Okay. They did have some short people. But no, it's a huge myth that they were all 5'2". And actually, it's a huge myth because they want you to believe that Jesus was like 5'2". Due to malnutrition and all this blah, 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 everyone was tiny back then, allegedly. No, I'm not buying it.
People think Jesus was 5'2"?
Yeah, go look it up. They say he was under 5'5".
Jesus Moggs, bro. There's
Jesus
no way
was-
Jesus is 5'2".
No, Jesus
That's
was
crazy.
6 foot easy. He is 6
Easy.
foot, 6 foot flat.
He's fucking
Easy.
Chad, bro.
It's for real. Mari, the priest who got stabbed in the eye like a year ago, he says he saw Jesus and he describes him 6 foot, blonde, bluish, greenish eyes.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that one in private. Never mind. I got a theory about India and Aryanism.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, dude. I think what happened to India some time ago may be what's happening to Western countries now, where the original people may have looked a bit diffy.
Ooh,
Maybe.
Okay. Well, here. Timucua Indians, they're tall. We got that out of the way. They're super tall. Even in these pictures, you can see how they paint the Indians a full head above them. Some of the other images are a lot more pronounced. You see their height. Well, what else did the Timucua Indians do? Well, they were tattooed. They did piercings all over the body. By the way, these are Canaanite practices, also Canaanite practices. In Exodus and Leviticus, you see rules against marking the skin, tattooing, piercing, all of that stuff. That is a direct response to the Canaanite cultures surrounding the Israelites. Tattoos, the gauges. There's a reason when people get too tattooed and too many piercings, they get a look. They get this look, this darkness to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that darkness is the same magic that kept the Canaanite culture alive. That darkness, that pagan, weird look, this like hellish look that, no offense, people with too many tattoos, too many piercings, they look like demons from hell.
100%.
I'm just gonna say it. And that comes from this ancient memory. The Canaanites engaged in that same stuff. Tattooed the whole body, piercing, cutting, like a ritual cutting to show like manhood and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
and I think it's tied into like a hatred of beauty, which is like natural. Like human beings are naturally beautiful, and the more you defer, whether it's by bad diet or bad body modification choices, you become more and more ugly. Essentially, sorry if it's too
yeah.
many, one or two, whatever. But like when it gets excessive, it's obviously fucking. Seeing someone like with face tattoos all over is obviously fucking off-putting.
100%. Oh yeah, and this is a good point. Tattoos mess with the meridians of the body, and the ink's not good for you. The ink clogs up your glands. You get black glands when you have tattoos, because that ink gets passed around in your body, and concentrated in all these areas. And also, whatever, it's like there's like ley lines in the body too. Piercings, fuck with those.
Mm-hmm.
The Timucua Indians were pierced, tattooed, extremely tall, freakishly, scary to look at. They wore their hair up in a bun. But what was the main thing that jumped out about them? Their lifestyle? The French not only wrote down that they were tall, they also wrote down that they lived over 300 years. 300 years old. Not 100, not 120. According to the French and the Timucua themselves, they lived over 300 years old. And they looked like it. Some of their elderly people looked like just skin and bone. Like it looked like something 350 years old. Really tall. So biblical height, biblical lifespan, and seemingly Canaanite practices. What else did they do? Sacrifice of the firstborn child. Infant sacrifice. Child sacrifice on an altar, much in the same way that the Canaanites did. The Canaanites what does it say in the Bible? They were the ones who would pass their children into fire, throw their children into fiery altars. They would bludgeon them with clubs. They would take them by the ankle and dash them against walls and rocks. That was considered the ceremonially correct way to unalive a child, was to hold it by the ankle and swing it like a sack of potatoes, or
At least we don't do that now, abortion clinics, they do it super nice, don't they? Oh wait.
Exactly. Dude, you're going to like this. Another thing that's in Exodus that goes right over a lot of people's heads. God literally says, search this up if you can. Please.
Yeah, sure.
Exodus 20:25. Why didn't the Israelites build pyramids? Why didn't Northern Europeans build pyramids? Why didn't North American Indians build pyramids? Does anyone know? Keep zoom in a little more, please.
Yeah, sure. Oh, there we go. That's
Yeah,
good.
perfect.
That's good.
Yeah.
There we go. All right,
Exodus
25. No.
Oh, maybe it's Exodus 25:20.
I could just Google the line too. Oh,
Hang on. It's in Exodus 25 or Exodus 20, around there. Um,
An,
steps,
an
step,
altar. Sorry.
yeah, steps unto mine altar. That verse. 2026, Exodus 2026.
Okay.
That's our year, guys. Hey, that's our year.
Whoa.
2026.
Interesting.
Maybe this is the year we're stepping up to the altar.
Yeah. Neither shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon.
Yes. Now, this shows us that the Israelites were opposed to stone pyramids, step pyramids. Number one, there's also 2025. If thou wilt. Oh, okay, hang on. I got the verse right the first time, by the way. I don't know why it didn't come up. But 2024, an altar of earth thou shalt make unto me. So if you're following the Israelite code or the Hebrew code, you don't make stone temples or stone altars. Well, guys, in North America, what do we see all over the place? Earth mounds, earthen mounds. But the Timucua used stone altars. What the hell? So it's like if you could compare most Native Americans to ancient Israelites, the Timucua would be their Canaanites, like the direct parallel, where they are engaged in this child sacrifice, but also they're using stone altars. I'm going to show you one of these. But the other Native Americans in Florida and around the Southeast United States did not use stone altars. Okay. They used earth mounds, ceremonial mounds. Sometimes they're pyramidal, but they don't have steps or hewn stone because it would appear many Native Americans are following the laws of Moses, which I talk about on my channel all the time. So no hewn stone, no steps, and you're supposed to build an earth altar or an earthen mound, a high place. Well, if those are customs that the Israelites are supposed to follow, people who go against them would fall into the category of Canaanites. So if the Timucua are also engaged in these practices, one could make the argument that these are Canaanites or they are engaged in Canaanite activity. Yeah, so what else can we
Ooh.
say?
Look at this website, americaistheoldworld.com. You seen this before?
Yeah, I think we sell that guy's book.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. Tim Bence also points to their type of bow that they used as uniquely Mediterranean design. Like it seems like the Timucua are almost like a colony who got stuck in the Gulf Stream or something and got deposited on the coast of Georgia. Many people have thought that the Phoenicians or the Israelites came to the Americas. The Mormons made a religion out of it, out of that theory. Yeah, some of our founding fathers believed the Native Americans were Israelites. Yeah,
Dude, the Mormon rabbit hole is deep, especially after all the old Charlie stuff that went down last year, where he died and whatnot, and how much influence the Mormons have over in that neck of the woods. Very interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, random.
No, it's all right. This is that guy's name, I think. Amenhotep Chavez El Bey. Classic. We was title, but I've talked to him a couple times. Could we sell his book here at the store? But all right. The Indians at Jekyll Island were doing child sacrifice. Could it at all be possible that the Rockefellers, Morgan, Warburg, Vanderbilt, all these guys, or Vanderflip, if all these families, these people, chose Jekyll Island because they sought to bask, bathe, absorb those dark deeds, that sinister legacy of that island? Could it be that they actually sought to like charge, you know, boost their scheme with the evil that had been left there from generations before? It's like a haunted house, right?
Yep.
If you're going to go do a dark, dirty black magic ritual, are you going to do it? I don't know. Maybe you would do it in a church, but I'd imagine you do it some dark, disgusting place where someone had done something evil before, right? Like you can almost piggyback on that. I know we're really getting out there as this kind of metaphysical and abstract kind of concept, but just think about it. Hey, babe, I wanted to come back here because this is the place that I proposed to you. That, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I want to come back to this place because this is where my family pledged they were going to stay and work this land and fight for this land. And, you know, the anniversary, this is the same place, the same day. There's meaning in that type of stuff. You may not think it's super important, but people do. Jesus returning, you know, people in the Bible returning to places that previous characters had done great things on. That's significant, for good or for worse. If I want to have a great day with my family, I'm going to go to a place that I've had many good memories before, that I know friends have had great times at, and vice versa. If I'm sending my enemy to like Guantanamo Bay, if I want my enemy sent somewhere terrible, it's going to be Guantanamo Bay, where I know like terrible things have happened and will happen. I'm not going to send my enemy to Disneyland. Well, maybe if it's like maybe I
You're
don't
not
know.
gonna get married at Abu Ghraib, right?
Exactly. You build. It sounds dumb to kind of try and explain it like this, but you don't build something good on bad foundations, right? Like you don't start something fresh in a place that is counterproductive to your mission, right? A place that represents something other than your mission. You want to piggyback on that evil. You want to almost like ride the draft of that evil, right?
And this is a bit like a bit of geomancy, isn't it? Like we talked about astrology, but like, you know, the magic of the place, is that what geomancy pretty much is, right?
What do you say, geomancy?
Yeah.
Or was it?
Yeah, geomancy is like just the magic of the area, essentially.
Yeah,
But
kind of.
making like a tie to the child sacrifice stuff, this may be a little bit of a stretch, but I don't really think so, because there is the conspiracy theory that you know, when your birth certificate is drafted or whatever, that like that essentially is like the corporate fiction that is you, the corpse of you. Then there's like kind of like the legal fiction you, and then the real body you, right? And you know, that happens to you when you're a child. So like when you're a child, in a way, because of this whole fiat currency system, we do like sacrifice our children and like register them to the government in a way, right?
Mhm.
The Catholic
Totally.
Church building on so many ancient sacred places is telling. Yeah, 100%.
And guys, these Indians are doing the child sacrifice. They are using stone altars. And by the way, um, Tim Bence, who blew the lid off the Jekyll Island child sacrifice angle, he explained how he actually saw an altar on Jekyll Island that one of the curators of the museum, or the, you know, tour guide, or someone responsible on the island, showed Tim Bence some things that most people don't get to see. That they went downstairs and he saw something that they actually used to have skeletons of Indians on display. and Tim Benz got to see them. People used to get to see them up until like the 90s or early 2000s when they built a new museum. By the way, Jekyll Island Museum today, it sucks. It's terrible. You have to pay so much money. The people are so what's the word? They're
Pompous?
so demeaning. When you try to ask anything about conspiracy theories, they have a protocol. They're like, "Oh, this is one of these conspiracy theory people." You ask anything about it, you can see I had a whole argument with some museum worker in my Jekyll Island video. But it's crazy how they try and gaslight you. And they don't even know the history. They just know the script that the museum gave them to say if anyone brings up giant Indians or Jekyll Island sacrificial altars or anything like that. But so Tim Benz says he got to see skeletons, some weapons that the Indians used to use, and that he got to see the altar. Now that was like 2008 or something. Then I don't know, 2011 or 12, he gave this famous interview. Tim Benz gave a phone interview. Can you search that up in the search Canaanite altar and the Federal Reserve, please? This is a famous phone interview that Tim Benz gave.
Are we looking for an image or for a video?
Yeah, just click that first link right there. Yeah, that one.
Kingdom
this-
Intelligence Briefing. Hell yeah.
Yeah. And zoom in on that if you can. Yeah, go up to the top. So this is an interview between Rob Skiba, who's passed away.
That Rob Skiba.
Yep, during COVID.
Interesting.
He passed away during COVID. R.I.P.
Yes.
I believe his son watches Old World Florida sometimes. Steve, I believe his name was. I could be wrong. Please don't hate me if I got his name wrong. But Mr. Skiba's son has tuned into Old World Florida before. So shout out to Rob Skiba. He had Timothy Benz on the phone to talk about what Tim Benz uncovered in Jekyll Island. And Tim Benz said, "Hang on, you mean to tell me that everyone and their mom knows about the financial side of Jekyll Island, but not a single person's ever talked about how the Indians here used to sacrifice their own kids? No one's ever connected those two?" Well, Tim Benz did. Tim Benz brought that to the surface. Tim Benz was smart enough and sophisticated enough to see how that makes sense to some of these people. It might not make any sense to us or the average people, but to the evil elite who wanted to steep their this scheme in some ancient evil, it made sense. It makes sense to me. So thanks to Tim Benz. Go watch this phone interview if you haven't, or listen to it. It's really good. But Tim Benz believes, personally, he suspects that this was like a colony of Canaanites who made it to America. We don't need that to be true for everything else to be true, but it's compelling. So the theory is basically that John D. Rockefeller signed or had his friends come up with the Federal Reserve Act while they're sitting on top of, literally standing on top of, an ancient Indian sacrificial altar. Meaning, at the clubhouse, that was like, so every building in Jekyll Island was built on top of some ancient Indian structure. So John D. Rockefeller's cottage. Can you search that up, please? Rockefeller Cottage, sure. Jekyll Island. The Rockefeller Cottage on Jekyll Island was called Indian Mound Cottage because it was built in the footprint of an Indian mound.
Yep, look at that. In the Wikipedia, Rockefeller Cottage, also known as Indian Mountain Cottage, the house on Jekyll Island. Yeah.
Yep.
You want the images of the wiki?
Image. That image is perfect right there. Also, there's an Indian Mound golf course on Jekyll Island that's still there today. And by the way, golf courses are just repurposed Indian mounds. That's true for most of America, especially Florida. But all right, so when they're having their meetings, most of it's going on in the clubhouse, which the clubhouse was the council house for the Indian tribe, their group ceremony building. The Rockefeller Cottage was an Indian mound. Okay. So you see how the different structures are built in the footprint of ancient structures. And yeah, what else? Man. I don't know. We should wrap it up soon. I mean, we covered most of the gravy, most of the meat and potatoes. But what else? Is there anything we need to mention?
It's a lot. We didn't go into the birth chart, but that's if you want to like hit it,
true.
you can hit the what you want to talk about real quick if you wanted. Like you had the Neptune connection, if you want, or we could call
Yeah.
it. You know,
So this, remember I was talking about the whales. Whales are ruled by either Pisces or Neptune, Poseidon, the god of the ocean. Finance is ruled by Pisces, the god of the ocean. Sorry, Poseidon, the god of the ocean, and Pisces, the sign of the two fish. Finance is fin ants. Water is money. You guys have heard this. You guys know about
liquid
this.
currency, river banks, banks. Yep.
Liquidity, cash flow. If you're losing money, if you're in debt, you're taking water. You're
Currency is the current of the sea. Yeah,
yeah, all that stuff. Money and water.
it's all
The,
liquid.
the moon, money is moony, and the moon rules the tides, right? And there's tides to finances too. There's a high tide, a low tide. There's an ebb and a flow. That. What were we talking about? I got fucking.
We're talking about currency, the birth chart, Neptune
Oh yeah,
on the ascendant.
in the Federal Reserve room where they signed it or where they conceived of it at the clubhouse in Jekyll Island. That room's still there today. You can go check it out. In that room, there's literally there's only one stained glass window in that room. And it's literally a mural or an altar to Poseidon or Neptune. It's a trident, stained glass trident with two fish on either side on the wall, looking right over this table where they signed the Federal Reserve Act into effect, or where they conceived of it. Sorry, signed and enacted later, 4 years later, but conceived in that room with that trident on the wall. That's a shrine to Poseidon if I've ever seen one. That is the financial priesthood of Poseidon getting together, serving their master. And also, it would seem, liberating the whales from whatever harvest.
Oppression. Yeah.
From getting harvested. So I think they were aware of this connection to Poseidon, the whales. Remember, Jekyll Island used to be called Island of the Whales. Whale Island, Jekyll Island. Now what's it called? Jekyll Island? This is what we're going to close with. Jekyll Island or Shekel Island? Jekyll Island or Shackle Island, right?
They shackled the nation.
Jekyll Island or Jekyll and Hyde Island, right?
They hid there for 2 weeks.
Yeah. The devil's advocate, good and evil, Jekyll and Hyde. showing your true colors, your true character, wearing a mask, the Jekyll and Hyde story. There was a Jekyll. Jekyll Island is named after a real Jekyll. There was also a Hyde who lived on Jekyll Island. This historical guy. But all right, that's the basics on the Jekyll Island story. If you want to go take a tour and learn more about it, check out my video on it. Jekyll Island Uncovered. Titanic
It goes
Indians. Yeah. All right, y'all.
It's late.
Yeah, I'm tired. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We got Merlin. Did I tell you we have 1,700 people watching?
No, you did not. That's wild.
I didn't
All
tell
right.
you that. Yeah, we've had 1,700 people watching so far. At least half of that's Brett. So thanks to Brett.
Audience.
Thanks to Brett's community for staying tuned. But appreciate all you guys. Thanks for tuning in. See you later. We are hopefully going to get back into the swing of doing Astro shows.
When the time is right.
Casting Couch Astrology coming up soon. I'm going to be doing a show tomorrow night about was Jesus Jewish? Monumental show, controversial. You guys need to tune in tomorrow night to find out if Jesus was Jewish.
That's awesome. He wasn't.
Spoiler, yes, spoiler alert. He wasn't. So probably just skip the stream tomorrow. Just leave it at that. He wasn't.
Nah, show off, support Longo. Oranges in the fucking chat, baby.
Hell yeah. Guys, see you tomorrow night. Thursday night tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Debating, maybe, discussing, I don't know, proving that Jesus was not Jewish, especially not by today's definition. So,
yeah,
yeah,
there's nothing important.
Huge misconceptions about Jesus and his ethnicity. But, guys, everyone, here, wait, hang on. Thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks to Twitter for showing up, man.
Yeah, shout out Brett's people.
God bless classical learner. Good night and GG pull-ups.
Anything you want to close with, Merlin?
No, man, knowledge is power, guys. Inform yourself, You can use knowledge to protect yourself.
Hell yeah. All right, guys. Everyone have a good night. And remember, vote red.
Till you're dead, baby.
Yep. Wild Indian, yeah.
Hey, V, line them up.
I'm a wild Indian, you know I go crazy. Ain't really Indian, that boy fugazi. I just keep it player, you can never play me. You got an ass so fat, girl, let's make a baby. And another one. Then I'm back to the trap, I'm trying to double some. She a bad woke chick and I love her tongue. We some jurisdiction boys, we some one-on-ones. Look, don't compare me to no Martin dog, I'm like Malcolm X. Die about our freedom, we'll leave a crack and stretch. Round of applause, boy, you know we clapping text. Chucky dog, towel play, yeah, nigga, that's what's next. Open up the cans just like Arizona. Pull up masked up like we got the Rona. We set up jurisdictions when we bought a corner. How you claiming that's your hood and you not the owner? Be the B, I just pulled up in the need for speed. Free the land, tell the colonizers that they need to leave. Wild Indian up in my veins, you know how we bleed. You ain't gotta lie about who we is, dog, just keep it G. We at war, we can't keep the peace. Since we at war, gotta keep the peace. peas, whack a cone, then I meditate. Should I need to breathe? Keep a Olmec head when we slide, dog, cause we the shit.
Like my niggas said, bitch, we the shit. I can't keep the peace. If it pop off, then I want a piece. I'm just on release. I'm in go mode, motherfuck the thief. In these streets like EBT, when we at war, make peace with me. I don't give a damn, understand. Fuck who stole this land, white or black or tan. Understand, it's fuck who stole this land. Might have seen me get little buddy these hands. He wasn't no abo man. A lot of these dudes is Sambo man. They full of shit like my ammo can. What they call an N-word out the wrong mouth, that's an ambulance. Wild Indian, get it in advance, or you can post dated. Ask around, I'm the most hated. Straight sacred, they stole acreage. Go ape shit, show ain't shit. It won't be televised, I don't tape shit.
Be the B, I just pulled up in the need for speed. Free the land, tell the colonizers that they need to leave. Wild Indian up in my veins, you know how we bleed. You ain't gotta lie about who we is, dog, just keep it G. We at war, we can't keep the peace. Since we at war, gotta keep the peace. Whack a cone, then I meditate. Should I need to breathe? Keep a Olmec head when we slide, dog, cause we the shit.